The fog clung to the cobblestones of Kensington like a shroud, thick and unyielding under the pallid glow of gas lamps flickering against the midnight rain. Mrs. Eleanor Hargrove stood in the shadowed hallway of her opulent townhouse on Addison Road, her black silk gown sodden at the hems, emerald eyes wide with a terror that had festered for months. Her hands, pale and trembling, clutched a trowel crusted with fresh mortar, while behind her the parlor door, newly sealed with row upon row of hastily laid bricks, seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. A faint, muffled sob echoed from within, not human, not quite animal, but something born of despair that clawed at the edges of sanity. She pressed her ear to the cold bricks, whispering to the void, "I had no choice, Victor. Forgive me," as if the words could staunch the weeping that still seeped through the cracks. This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. These mysteries challenge your mind and reward attention. Across town at 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes paced the cluttered sitting room, his gaunt frame cutting sharp angles through the haze of pipe smoke. It was 1:30 in the morning when the urgent telegram arrived, smudged by rain but insistent. "Come at once. Parlor bricked shut. Something lives inside. E. Hargrove." Watson, rousing from his armchair with a start, rubbed his mustachioed face and glanced at the clock. "Holmes, what devilry is this? At our age?" Holmes's piercing grey eyes gleamed with that predatory focus, the hawkish nose flaring as he snatched his Inverness cape. "Not devilry, Watson. Desperation. And desperation is the mother of revelation." They plunged into a hansom cab, the horse's hooves splashing through puddles that mirrored the stormy sky, the air heavy with coal smoke and the distant toll of Big Ben. Eleanor Hargrove had not always been this spectre of a woman. Once she was the belle of Kensington society, her raven hair cascading in soft waves, her laughter lighting the chandeliers at garden parties. Married at 22 to Victor Hargrove, the iron-fisted industrialist whose factories belched fumes over the Thames, she had traded youthful dreams for a gilded cage. Victor's beard hid a cruel mouth, his stocky build belying a temper that bruised more than flesh. Their union produced no children, only echoes in the vast halls of Hargrove Manor, a sprawling Victorian edifice of red brick and ivy, its windows like watchful eyes. But 5 months prior, Victor had vanished from his study one foggy evening, his ledger books pristine, his valet swearing he'd retired early. The police, led by the bulldog-faced Inspector Gregson, had poked about for a week before declaring it a suicide, the body presumed lost to the river. Kensington whispered of debts, of mistresses, but Eleanor held her silence, her porcelain skin growing paler, her chignon tighter, as if binding her unraveling soul. Now, as Holmes and Watson's cab rattled to a halt before the manor, the front door creaked open before they could knock. Lila Thorne, the lithe maidservant in her 20s, with mousy hair pinned haphazardly and wide, frightened hazel eyes, ushered them in with a curtsy that trembled. "Mum's in a state, sir, been brickin' since dusk. Says it's to keep him in, or us out." Holmes's gaze swept the foyer. Marble floors slick with tracked mud, a crystal vase toppled and shattered, its flowers wilting in accusation. "Led on," he murmured, his voice a silken blade. Lila led them down the corridor, gaslight casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres. Watson felt the chill seep into his bones, his old war wound aching in sympathy. Steady, old chap, he thought, though his hand hovered near his service revolver. Eleanor turned as they entered the hallway, her haunted eyes locking onto Holmes like a drowning woman spies a lifeline. "Mr. Holmes, thank God. It's Victor. He's not gone. I thought sealing him away would end it, but he weeps. The sound. Oh, the sound." Holmes knelt before the bricked wall, his long fingers tracing the mortar still tacky to the touch. Crude work, he noted clinically, yet frantic. Watson peered closer, detecting a faint dampness seeping through, not water, but something viscous, tinged pink. "Good Lord, Holmes, this is madness. Has she entombed a man alive?" Eleanor collapsed against the opposite wall, her voice fracturing. "No, not alive, not anymore. But his spirit clings. I struck him down in rage after years of his fists and his lies. The parlor was our prison. He locked me in there during his rages. Last night, he confessed everything. The embezzlement, the lover hidden in Whitechapel, Lila's mother, no less. Lila gasped, hand to mouth, her face draining of colour. He promised to ruin us all. Holmes rose, his dishevelled black hair falling across his forehead, mind already dissecting the anomaly. The weeping. Describe it precisely. Eleanor swallowed, tears carving paths down her cheeks, like a child lost in the dark, muffled, endless. Started after I laid the first brick. Victor's study is adjacent. The connecting door was always bolted from his side. But now... Holmes pressed his ear to the wall. Silence reigning for a taut moment. Then faintly the sob, wet, rhythmic, emanating not from the parlor but deeper, as if from the very foundation. Intriguing. Not supernatural, Watson, but mechanical perhaps, or acoustic trickery. Yet the mortar is fresh, and no body was reported missing. Inspector Gregson ruled suicide hastily. I recall the case. Minimal investigation. Hargrove's influence buying discretion. Watson steadied Eleanor with a gentle hand, his kind blue eyes conveying the steadiness of a battlefield surgeon. "Madam, why summon Holmes now? Why not the yard?" She shook her head, raven strands escaping her chignon. "Gregson suspects me already. His men sniffed about last month, but you, Mr. Holmes, you see truth where others see shadows. And Lila." She found Victor's bloodied shirt hidden in the scullery. Lila nodded miserably, twisting her apron. "I didn't mean to, ma'am. Thought it was rags." Holmes's eyes narrowed, cataloguing, the maid's fear not feigned, Eleanor's guilt raw but layered with something purer, remorse laced with defiance. "Tell me of the marriage, Mrs. Hargrove. Spare no detail." As the rain hammered the mullioned windows, Eleanor poured it out. The early years of opulence masking Victor's growing demons, opium dens by the docks, debts funneled through shell companies, blows delivered in drunken fury. Faith had been her anchor once, Sunday services at St. Mary Abbots, where the vicar preached redemption's boundless reach. But Victor mocked it, bricking up her Bible in that very parlor as jest. Last night, cornered by his confession, she'd seized the poker from the hearth. One swing and he crumpled. Panic sealed the deed. She dragged him behind the heavy drapes, fetched bricks from the garden shed, Victor's own folly project, and walled the door before dawn. But the weeping began at vespers, as if judgment itself wept for her sin. Holmes paced, pipe reignited, smoke curling like unspoken accusations. A vicarious thrill stirred in him, rare for one who prized intellect over emotion, the puzzle intertwined with human frailty. Watson sensed it, the subtle shift in his friend's detachment. "Holmes, this borders on confession. Shall we summon authorities?" Holmes halted, staring at the bricks, not yet observed the damp patch spread's odour faintly metallic. Blood or Thames seepage? "No, examine the base." With a penknife he pried a loose brick free. Behind it not darkness but a glint of porcelain, a shattered chamber pot, its contents mingled with rainwater, trickling from a hairline chimney crack above. The weeping amplified, a gurgle now echoing hollowly. Eleanor's face crumpled in fresh horror. But Victor... Holmes met her gaze, voice low. "Your husband is not interred here, madam. The parlour stands empty as Scotland Yard attested. But something festers. Your guilt manifests in hallucination, amplified by this fortuitous leak." Lila whimpered. "Then where is he, sir?" Holmes's lips thinned. "A question for Dawn." "Watson, fetch Mrs. Hudson for tea and a constable discreetly." Eleanor sank to her knees, murmuring a prayer half-remembered from girlhood. "Lord, have mercy on a sinner like me." As the first grey light pierced the fog, a new sound intruded, a heavy knock at the door. Inspector Gregson bellowed from the street. "Mrs. Hargrove, open up! We've word of a ghost and fresh mortar." But Holmes's mind raced ahead, sensing layers yet unpeeled, the maid's averted eyes, the widow's fractured faith, and a secret that promised not just crime, but redemption's improbable path. What had Victor truly hidden in that parlour, beyond rage and ruin? The heavy oak door of the Hargrove townhouse rattled under Inspector Gregson's insistent pounding, the sound reverberating through the fog-choked halls like a judgment hammer. Mrs. Eleanor Hargrove froze on her knees amid the parlor's dust-moated air, her black silk skirts pooling like spilled ink, while Lila Thorne clutched the tray of shattered teacups, her knuckles white as bone china. Dr. John Watson moved instinctively toward the entrance, his limp more pronounced in the haste, hand hovering near his old service revolver tucked in his coat, a habit from Afghan sands that never quite faded. Holmes remained by the bricked-up archway, his hawkish profile etched sharp against the gaslight's flicker, grey eyes dissecting the scene as if it were a vivisection slide. "Open up, Mrs. Hargrove," Gregson boomed from the step, his bulldog jowls quivering beneath the brim of his bowler. "We've reports from the neighbours, moaning walls, spectral lights. Harbouring a fugitive, are we, or worse?" Watson cracked the door, positioning his sturdy frame to block the immediate rush. "Inspector, a touch of decorum. Mr. Holmes is here, and the lady is unwell." Gregson shoved past with a snort, his rumpled serge suit shedding droplets from the night's drizzle, two constables flanking him like ill-trained hounds. "Unwell? Bah! Words out from the docks. Your late husband's foreman swears he saw Victor Hargrove staggering Thameside last month, drunk as a lord but alive. And now this parlour nonsense." He jabbed a thick finger toward the mortar-veined bricks. "Tear it down, lads. Body's in there, mark my words." Eleanor rose unsteadily, her emerald eyes hollowed by terror. Raven chignon unravelling strands that clung to her porcelain dampness. "No, please," she whispered, voice fraying like old lace. "Victor. He's gone. The Lord took him in his mercy." Holmes stepped forward, pipe clenched between teeth, smoke veiling his expression like London fog. "Patience, Inspector. Brute force ill suits deduction." He gestured to the pried loose brick, the gurgling leak now a steady drip onto the Persian rug. "Observe the source. Chimney seepage mingled with privy overflow. No corpse, no ghost, merely mortared regret." Gregson reddened, bulldog scowl deepening. "Regret? This widow bricks a room on the night her husband's reported vanished, and you call it plumbing. Holmes, your parlour tricks won't save her from the yard. The maid here babbled to a beat copper about weeping walls. Judgment from the Almighty, she said." Lila shrank back, lithe form trembling, her mousy brown hair escaping its cap, freckled cheeks flushing. I only told what I heard, sir. The mistress praying all night after the argument." Holmes's gaze pinned the girl like a lepidopterist specimen. "Argument? Elaborate, Miss Thorne." Lila swallowed, glancing to Eleanor for rescue that didn't come. Master came home roaring from the factories, reeking of gin and the river mud, shouting about debts, rivals undercutting his steelworks. Mistress tried to calm him, offered sherry, spoke of the vicar's sermon on forgiveness. He struck the decanter from her hand, glass everywhere. Then silence. She went to the parlour next morn, bricked it quick as sin. Eleanor pressed a hand to her throat, the memory flooding back unbidden, pulling her into the abyss of that November eve 2 months prior. Victor's bulk filling the doorway, beard matted with Thames grime, eyes bloodshot from the opium dens he'd frequented since the mills faltered under foreign steel. Eleanor had stood by the hearth, stirring cocoa for Lila, her own heart heavy from the day's whispered scandals at the Kensington parish tea. Victor's rumoured affairs with dockside doxies, his fists bruising more than his ledgers. Victor, love, the vicar, spoke of Proverbs today. A soft answer turns away wrath. Try the cocoa, rest your soul. He'd lunged, stocky frame slamming her against the oak panelling, breath hot with vice. Soul. Have no time for your Bible-thumping, woman. The factories bleed money, creditors circle like vultures, unless you pawn those pearls for a stake. His hand clamped her wrist, twisting until she cried out, the cocoa spilling in a scalding arc. Rage boiled in her then, a lifetime's grievances erupting. The stillborn son 5 years buried, her inheritance squandered on his follies, the isolation of this gilded cage on Kensington High Street. In blind fury, she'd seized the poker from the stand, swung it wild. It connected with a sickening thud against his temple. Victor crumpled, blood pooling on the axe-minster, his chest heaving once, then still. Panic clawed her. No time for screams or summons. Lila asleep upstairs, the fog muffling all. She dragged his weight behind the velvet drapes, fetched bricks from the garden folly he'd abandoned, cold, rough things that bit her palms raw. Mortar mixed by lamplight, hands shaking as vespers tolled from St. Mary Abbots. By dawn, the parlor sealed, a tomb for her sin. But at dusk, the weeping started, soft at first, then insistent, as if Victor's spirit condemned her from the bricks. Back in the present, Holmes circled the maid, his gaunt frame casting long shadows. And after the bricking, Miss Thorne? Did you see the master again? Lila fidgeted, eyes darting to the floorboards. No, sir. Mistress said he fled in shame, took a packet to America. But the walls, they moan her name some nights. Gregson guffawed. Superstition. We'll have this down by noon, Holmes. Find the body or the flight manifest. Watson knelt by Eleanor, his kind blue eyes steady, moustache twitching with concern. Madam, faith has pulled many from darker pits. My own Afghan nights taught me that. Grace amid the wreckage. Have you spoken to your priest? She met his gaze, a flicker of hope piercing her despair. Father Michael's at the parish. I confessed fragments, but shame sealed my lips full. Holmes interrupted, penknife probing higher along the mortar seam. Enough theatre. Inspector, your foreman errs. No Thames sighting matches Hargrove's frame. Stocky, bearded, 54. But this. He freed another brick, revealing not bone but yellowed foolscap wedged in the gap. A crumpled invoice, ink smeared but legible. Victor Hargrove, esque. To opium supplier, 200 tartars dated the fatal night. Eleanor's breath hitched, Victor's vice, hidden even from me. Holmes's voice dropped, almost gentle. Vice begets flight, not death. Your blow stunned, but did not kill. He fled his debts, his demons, perhaps to the docks disguised. The weeping. Your conscience amplified by leak and loneliness. But this invoice hints deeper. A creditor's mark. A cross-name, Elias Crow, rival mill owner. Gregson leaned in, skepticism cracking. Blackmail. Holmes nodded faintly. Or motive for murder, yours or another's. As constables hammered at the bricks under Gregson's barked orders, dust sifting like grave ash, Watson helped Eleanor to a settee, her hands cold in his. Lila hovered, whispering apologies. Holmes slipped the invoice into his pocket, mind whirring through possibilities. Victor alive, scheming from shadows, or silenced by Crow. Yet beneath the logic stirred an unfamiliar pang. Eleanor's raw plea echoing his own buried voids, the cocaine syringe waiting at Baker Street, the detachment that starved the soul. Outside, carriage wheels splashed through puddles bearing Father Michael's unbidden, summoned by parish whispers. But as the first brick tumbled free, revealing only empty space and rat-scat, a sharper sound cut the air, a child's muffled sob from the garden shadows. Lila paled. The master's bastard? From his dockside trysts? Holmes turned, pipe forgotten, toward the unraveling truth that promised not justice alone, but a redemption none had sought. The sob pierced the thickening dusk like a needle through silk, faint but insistent, drawing all eyes to the garden beyond the French doors. Holmes strode forward first, his long legs carrying him past the splintered parlor wall where constables still pried at stubborn bricks, their hammers echoing dully against the rising mist. Watson followed, steadying Eleanor Hargrove, whose knees buckled beneath her, her black silk skirts whispering against the Persian rug. Lila Thorne, the maid, froze in the doorway, her lithe frame trembling, freckled cheeks drained of colour under the pallid gaslight. Out in the garden of Hargrove House, the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and wilting roses, the kind that clung to late autumn in Kensington. Ivy strangled the stone walls, and a wrought-iron gate creaked in the wind off the Thames. The child huddled there, no more than 7, his small body wedged behind an overgrown laurel bush, knees drawn to chest. Ragged trousers caked in mud, a threadbare cap pulled low over matted brown hair, and eyes, wide, feral, the colour of storm clouds, darting like a cornered fox. He clutched a crust of bread, knuckles white, as if it were his only anchor. "Who are you, lad?" Holmes knelt, voice low, devoid of its usual sharpness, more coaxant than command. The boy flinched, scooting back until thorns snagged his sleeve. Inspector Gregson lumbered up behind, lanterns swinging, casting jagged shadows that danced like accusations. God's teeth, a street urchin, in a widow's garden. "Speak up, boy, or it's the workhouse for you." Eleanor sank onto a mossy bench, her emerald eyes fixed on the child, a tremor rippling through her. "Victor," she whispered, hand pressing her corseted chest as if to still a fracturing heart. Lila darted forward, dropping to her knees beside the boy, her voice a hushed lilt thick with East End vowels. "It's all right, Tommy, they won't hurt you. Mrs. Hargrove's kind, she is. Remember? The one what gives you scraps when master ain't looking." Tommy. Holmes filed the name away, noting the boy's flinch at Lila's touch, the way his gaze flicked to Eleanor, not with fear, but a wary longing. "Your father, lad." "Victor Hargrove, tell us true." The child swallowed hard, crumbs tumbling from his lips. Pa said, "Hide till he comes back." Said the bad man'd take me if I showed. Tears carved clean tracks through the grime on his cheeks, and he buried his face in his knees, shoulders shaking with silent heaves. Gregson's face reddened further, mustache twitching like an angry caterpillar. Bastard spawn. Hargrove's dockside leavings bricked up with the parlor. "Madam, this stinks worse than Limehouse. Confess it. You walled him in alive, the both of them." His bellow rattled the garden gate, but Eleanor only stared, her porcelain skin cracking with unshed grief. "No," she breathed, the word barely audible over the rustle of leaves. "Never him." Victor brought the boy here that night, high on his pipes, ranting of rivals, Elias Crow hounding his debts. He struck me, laughing mad, swore the child was his insurance, leverage against the mill owner. I swung the poker in rage, caught his temple. He crumpled, but breathed still. Then fled, staggering into the fog, dragging Tommy to hide him from me, perhaps. His shame. Flashbacks seized her then, vivid as the parlor dust still clouding her skirts. That fateful evening 6 months past, gas lamps flickering low in Hargrove House, Victor had burst through the door reeking of opium dens and Thames rot, his bearded face slack with haze, eyes glassy, clutching the boy like a rag doll. "Elias Crow wants the mills, Eleanor. This whelp's my proof. His sisters get, passed off as mine. Pay up or the brat squeals." She'd recoiled, heart twisting at the sight of Tommy's terror, her own barren womb a silent scream after years of failed heirs. Victor's vices had poisoned their bed long ago. Opium, whores, the endless grind of his factories chewing men like chaff. "Get out," she'd hissed, grabbing the poker from the hearth. One swing, a sickening thud, blood blooming on his brow. But as she turned, he lurched up, snarling, scooped the boy and vanished into the night. Days later, the parlor bricked overnight by his silent masons, mortar fresh, to hide. What? His flight, his shame. Her hands, empty of children, had trembled as she wept alone, the walls closing in like judgment. Watson laid a gentle hand on her shoulder, his surgeon's touch warm against the chill seeping from the ground. "Steady now, Mrs. Hargrove. Holmes will unravel it." But inside, Watson wrestled his own shadows, the Afghan bullet in his leg, a perpetual ache, mirroring the war in his soul for purpose beyond bullets and bandages. Holmes's genius dazzled, yet this. A child's forsaken cry echoed his own boyhood losses, stirring a faith he'd half buried under tweed and tobacco. Holmes rose slowly, pipe reignited, smoke curling like unspoken prayers into the fog. Leverage indeed. Crow, the invoice suggests. Victor faked his death, hid the boy as pawn. But why brick the parlor? A message or decoy? He paced the gravel path, mind a whirlwind of deductions, yet beneath it, that alien pang deepened, a crack in his fortress of reason. Cocaine whispers tempted from his pocket vial, promising clarity, but Eleanor's raw unraveling mirrored voids he'd long ignored. The army ghosts, the solitude that gnawed deeper than any 7% solution. Gregson snorted, cuffing Tommy's shoulder none too gently. Fetch the lad's kin, Lila, and you, Widow Scotland Yard'll have answers by dawn. Father Michaels arrived then, carriage wheels grinding to a halt at the garden gate, his black cassock a shadow in the lantern glow. The parish priest, stout and silver-haired, with eyes like weathered oak that saw through facades. Mrs. Hargrove, he said softly, crossing to her side, Bible tucked under arm. Whispers reached St. Mary's. Whatever this, Grace waits for the broken. Eleanor looked up, tears spilling at last, her voice fracturing. Father, I struck him, meant to end it. But he lives, or dead by another's hand, and the boy. Victor's sin thrust upon us. Am I damned for it? The priest knelt, voice steady as vespers. Damnation's not yours to claim, child. Confession opens the door. Grace and effort together. Lila scooped Tommy into her arms, the boy clinging like lichen to stone, murmuring endearments in her Cockney cadence. Holmes watched, detached no longer, as the group retreated indoors, the parlour's maw now a hollow joke. Empty, but for echoes. Crow, he murmured to Watson, pocketing the invoice anew. We visit his mill at first light. But the child's eyes, they plead a truth beyond ledgers. Watson nodded, heart heavy. And yours, Holmes. That syringe calls louder in silence. As night deepened, Kensington's fog swallowed Hargrove House, but inside, Eleanor's lowest ebb crested. Kneeling with Father Michaels in the drawing-room, rosary beads clicking like hesitant heartbeats, she whispered fragments of her soul's wreckage, barren years, Victor's cruelties, the poker swing born of despair, not murder, Father, but a cry for release. He nodded, absolution hovering. The first step, turning toward light amid the fall. Yet dawn promised no mercy. A note slipped under the door by unseen hand. Crow knows the boy. Come alone or the whelp pays. Holmes crumpled it, resolve hardening, but within. Transformation stirred, a detective's logic bending towards something redemptive, unbidden. Comment if you've known someone who found their way back. Dawn crept over Kensington like a thief, grey light filtering through the fog that clung to Hargrove House's ivy-choked walls. Holmes stood motionless at the study's window, the crumpled note burning in his fist, its ink still damp from the night's intruder. Crow knows the boy. The words looped in his mind, a riddle laced with menace. He had slipped out alone as instructed, leaving Watson snoring in the guest room, revolver within reach. The mill waited on the Thames's muddy fringe, where iron gears ground hope to dust. Eleanor stirred in the parlour's adjoining chamber, her body aching from the night's confessions. Father Michael's voice echoed faintly, grace and effort together, but sleep had been fitful, haunted by Victor's rasp, the poker heavy in her hand. She rose, silk wrapper whispering against floorboards, and padded to the bricked-up wall. Her fingers traced the mortar's fresh ridges, cool and unyielding. Behind it lay not just secrets, but the husk of her marriage, the boy Tommy hidden like a sin too shameful for light. Lila had sworn silence, bundling the child into the attic with bread and milk, but fear gnawed at her. Victor's shadow lingered, even in death. Or was it death? Holmes reached the Hargrove mill as hammers struck anvil in rhythmic fury, the air thick with coal smoke and the tang of molten steel. Workers in soot-blackened smocks shuffled past, eyes hollowed by endless shifts. He presented himself at the overseer's shack, gaunt frame cutting through the clamour like a blade. Mr. Crow, if you please. Urgent business from the widow. The foreman, a wiry man with grease-smeared beard and eyes sharp as lathe bits, sized him up. Elias Crow spat tobacco juice into the Thames's swirl. Holmes, eh? Scotland Yard's lapdog. Hargrove spoke of you once, said you'd sniff out a rat in a cathedral. What's the widow want now? Her man's barely cold. Holmes leaned in, voice low amid the steam hiss. Her man, as you say, met his end strangely. An invoice from your ledgers caught my eye, payments to a certain Lila Thorne far beyond a maid's wage, and whispers of a boy. Crow laughed, a bark like rusted hinges. Nosy, ain't you? Victor had appetites. Lila kept him quiet. The boy, his bastard tucked away. Widow knew, turned a blind eye till she didn't. Bricked the parlour to bury it all, I reckon. But secrets leak, Mr. Holmes, like slag from a pore. The detective's mind raced, piecing fragments. Victor's cruelties confessed by Eleanor, the poker swing, the empty parlor. Not murder, but a cry for release. Yet Crow gripped his arm, breath sour with gin. "Stay out or the boy suffers." "Tommy, ain't it? Cute lad. Thames swallows more than barges." Holmes wrenched free, eyes narrowing to slits. "Threaten a child, and you'll find Scotland Yard cells colder than this fog." Crow smirked, retreating into the mill's roar. But Holmes noted the tremor in his hand, fear masked as bravado. Back at Hargrove House, Watson paced the drawing room, moustache twitching with unease. Holmes burst in, coat dusted with mill grime, recounting the encounter in clipped tones. Crow guards a deeper rot, Victor's indiscretions, payments to cover them. The boy, Tommy, is the key. Eleanor's face paled as she entered, overhearing. "No," she breathed, sinking into a velvet chair. "Victor forced it on Lila years ago during one of his rages. She bore the child alone, hid him in the parlor attic space. I struck Victor that night, yes, but he rose, laughing, said he'd expose us all. Then, gone. Bricked it to protect Tommy, to silence the past." Watson glanced at Holmes, whose fingers drummed the mantel, cocaine syringe glinting in his pocket like a siren's call. The struggle etched deeper lines on his brow. Logic demanded truth, but mercy tugged, unfamiliar. Father Michaels returned then, Bible in hand, sensing the storm. "Lies bind tighter than bricks, Mrs. Hargrove. Face them with us." Eleanor nodded, tears carving paths through powder. "But Crow, he'll destroy us." The priest laid a hand on her shoulder. "Grace covers the wreckage if you claim it." Lila appeared from the kitchens, Tommy trailing, his small face smudged with jam, eyes wide with innocent trust. "Mummy," he lisped, climbing into Eleanor's lap. The room stilled, the boy's warmth piercing her numbness. Holmes knelt unexpectedly, peering at the child. 5 years, perhaps? "Born when, Lila?" The maid fidgeted, Cockney lilt thickening. 91, sir. Master's fancy after Christmas. Victor promised coin to hush it, but Crow tallied the books, squeezed extra. Inspector Gregson lumbered in unannounced, rumpled suit straining, bulldog face flushed. "Holmes, yard's got wind. Parlor's empty, but mortar fresh as yesterday. Widow, you're for questioning." Eleanor clutched Tommy, voice steadying. "Inspector, it was no crime, a desperate act." Gregson snorted. "Desperate? Bricking room screams guilt." Holmes interjected smoothly. "Patience, Gregson. The mill yields answers. Crow's your man, extortionist, hiding Victor's bastardy." Tension coiled as Gregson eyed the group, ambition warring with doubt. "Fine. Dawn raid tomorrow. But Holmes, cross me, and you're next." He stormed out, carriage rattling away. Watson exhaled. Ruthless, that one. Holmes paced, inner conflict surfacing, detached genius cracking under human frailty. The syringe whispered relief, but Tommy's gaze held him. Watson noticed, voice gentle. "Steady, old chap. This case. It's changing us." Evening fell, fog pressing against panes like uninvited guests. Eleanor gathered them in the sanctuary of the conservatory. Glass walls misted, ferns curling like prayers. Father Michaels led a quiet rosary, beads clicking softly. Lila hummed a lullaby to Tommy, her own arc bending, from victim to guardian. Eleanor whispered her fears. "What if Grace fails me?" The priest smiled faintly. "It never does, child. Effort meets it halfway." Holmes slipped away to the garden, syringe in hand, but paused at the rose arbor, thorns drawing a bead of blood. Logic faltered. A detective's heart stirred, redemptive and raw. Watson found him there, revolver holstered. "Crow moves tonight, I wager. We arm ourselves, not with lead but truth." Inside, a crash shattered the peace, window glass tinkling as a brick sailed through, note attached. "Midnight, docks. Boy or blood?" Eleanor gasped, transformation fracturing yet forging. "They wouldn't." Holmes straightened. "They will, unless we end it. But how far justice bends, that's the true mystery." As midnight neared, the group huddled, resolve hardening amid setbacks. Lila clutched Tommy, her Cockney fire igniting. "Not on my watch." Father Michaels prayed, voice a beacon. Watson loaded his Webley, heart heavy with the struggle's weight. Holmes' eyes alight led them into the fog-shrouded streets, the tempter's lair calling. Yet within him, unbidden grace flickered, a man beyond cases, toward redemption's edge. The docks loomed, Thames lapping hungrily, crates stacked like tombstones. Crow waited in shadow, silhouette menacing. Holmes stepped forward alone as bidden, Watson circling unseen. "You seek the boy?" Crow growled. "Victor's spawn deserves the deep." Eleanor watched from hiding, soul wrenching. No more hiding. She emerged, voice raw. "He's innocent," as Victor never was. Crow lunged, knife glinting, but Holmes dodged cane cracking wrist. Struggle ensued, grunts echoing over water. Watson burst forth, pinning the villain. Gregson arrived late, lanterns flaring, too late for glory. Crow spat curses as irons clicked. The boy safe, but Eleanor's lowest night deepened. Confession loomed full. Back at house, dawn breaking, she knelt anew. "Father, the full truth. Victor lived after my blow. I bricked him in alive, with the parlor's secrets. Rage, not murder intent." The priest nodded gravely. "Grace awaits even that. Effort now. Face the law." Holmes overheard, shock rippling his composure. Justice or mercy? The scales tipped, his arc bending. Watson clasped his shoulder. "We're in the struggle, Holmes. Together." But as peace settled uneasily, a new note whispered under door. "The sins run deeper." Father knows. The hook sank deeper, transformation teetering on revelation's brink. Dawn's frail light filtered through the heavy drapes of the Hargrove townhouse in Kensington, casting long shadows across the parlor where the bricks still whispered their grim secret. Eleanor Hargrove sat rigid in her high-backed chair, the note clutched in her trembling hand, its ink stark against the cream paper. "The sins run deeper." Father knows. Her emerald eyes, shadowed by exhaustion, darted to the door as footsteps echoed from the hall. Sleep had been a cruel tease, fractured by visions of Victor's final gasps behind the wall she had sealed with her own hands, not in cold murder, but in a blaze of terror and fury after his drunken assault. Now with Tommy safe from Crow's clutches, the weight of full confession pressed like the Thames fog outside, thick and unrelenting. Sherlock Holmes paced the Persian rug, his gaunt frame cutting sharp angles in the gaslight's glow, hawkish nose twitching at the scent of damp wool and fear sweat. The doc's victory felt hollow. Crow's arrest by Gregson's bungling hands had yielded only snarls of denial, no deeper web unraveled. Holmes's mind raced, synapses firing like Baker Street's hearth. Logic demanded the note's author lurked closer, in the sanctum of trust. Dr. John Watson slumped nearby, his mustachioed face lined with the night's toll, Webley holstered, but hand lingering near. Loyalty bound him, yet doubt gnawed. Holmes's mercy toward Eleanor clashed with the law's iron code, mirroring Watson's own Afghan ghosts. Lila Thorne burst in, her lithe form taut as a bowstring, Cockney accent slicing the tension. "The boy's frettin', ma'am, says shadows followed us home." Tommy huddled behind her, wide eyes reflecting the parlor's gloom, small fists clenched around a wooden soldier, Victor's heir, innocent pawn in a legacy of vice. Eleanor rose, silk skirts rustling, and pulled him close, her raven chignon loosening like her resolve. "Hush, love. We're mending what father broke." But the words tasted bitter. Mending required truth, and truth might orphan him forever. Father Michaels arrived unbidden, his clerical black stark against the opulent walls, face weathered like ancient oak, eyes holding a quiet fire. "Word from the docks reached me swift, Mrs. Hargrove. Praise God for deliverance." Yet his gaze flickered to the bricked wall. A subtle tell, Holmes noted. The priest knew more than Vespers. Eleanor thrust the note forward. "Father, they say you know. Victor's sins. Deeper ones. Tell me, please. I can't bear another shadow." The priest sighed, sinking into a chair, hands folding in prayer habit. "Victor sought my counsel years past. Confessed appetites that shamed even his steel heart. debts to shadows beyond Crow's ilk, favours owed to men in high places who peddled flesh and opium along the docks. He bricked not just his parlour, but souls into silence. I urged repentance, offered Grace's bridge. But pride walled him in long before your moment. Michael's voice cracked, revealing his own fracture, a fellow traveller in Mercy's mire, once a docker's son tempted by the same riverside vices. Holmes leaned in, grey eyes piercing. "And your silence, father? Complicity or compassion?" The detective's tone held no accusation, only the scalpel of inquiry, his arc bending as ethical limits blurred. Justice was truth pursued, but mercy. Mercy was the uncharted fog. Watson shifted uncomfortably, blue eyes pleading for restraint. "We're not the yard, Holmes. Let Grace breathe." Eleanor's breath hitched, porcelain skin flushing. "If Victor's web ensnared you, father, then the scandal devours us all." Tommy whimpered, burying his face in her skirts. Lila knelt beside him, rough hands gentle. "Easy, lad. We've faced worse than whispers." Her fire-masked fear, background of orphaned streets made her kin to the boy, her motivation fierce protection amid her own unspoken losses. Outside, carriage wheels clattered on cobblestones, heralding Inspector Gregson. The burly detective stormed in, red face apoplectic under his rumpled bowler, bulldog jowls quivering. "Holmes, this crow-blighter's singing half-tunes, claims Hargrove owed him for silencing a girl, one what vanished years back. Points to this house." Gregson's ambition flared, cuffing air as if to seize glory. "Arrests at dawn, mark my words." Panic rippled the room. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat, haunted eyes widening. A girl? Victor's? Indiscretions? I knew fragments, cries in the night, payments vanishing, but bricked. No. Holmes's mind whirred, planting seeds from earlier clues. The loose parlour brick he'd noted on first visit, scrawled initials faint beneath mortar, E.T., perhaps not Eleanor alone. Lila paled, lithe frame stiffening. Tempter's lie or truth? Father Michael stood, voice steadying like a bell in fog. "We go to St. Agnes now. Sanctuary demands it. Confession's veil lifts only there." The group moved as one, spilling into the chill morning, Kensington's gas lamps flickering out against a sky bruised purple. St. Agnes Church loomed at the district's edge, its spire piercing the smog, stone facade etched with saints' patient gazes. Inside, incense hung heavy, beeswax candles guttering in iron sconces, atmosphere thick with echoed sins and whispered absolutions, haven for the wrecked, forge for transformation. In the shadowed confessional, Eleanor knelt, voice raw through the lattice. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, the blow, the wall. Alive he suffered. Rage blinded me, but his evils birthed it. Beatings, debts, that poor girl. If true." Tears soaked her gloves, body shaking with the physical ache of unburdening, clean air of truth-piercing like sunlight after storm. Michael's opposite murmured Grace's litany. "Effort meets mercy, child." Victor repented in fragments, unholy. Yet as she emerged, face pale but lighter, Holmes cornered him in the vestry. The girl, E.T., Lila Thorne, Lila's kin. The priest faltered, hands clasping crucifix. "Sister?" "Yes, Victor's folly bricked away in shame before your time here, Lila." She never knew full. Holmes's composure cracked, a rare tremor in his dishevelled hair. Deception layered like fog. Watson gripped his arm. "Holmes, the struggle's ours now. Law or light?" Lila overheard, bursting in, eyes blazing. "My sister? That bastard!" Her Cockney rage echoed off stained glass, fists balled, arc igniting from servant shadow to avenger. Tommy clung to Eleanor, the family's fracture deepening yet binding tighter. Gregson hammered the church door then, warrant flapping. Scotland Yard don't wait for prayers. Chaos swirled, accusations flying, lanterns bobbing as constables swarmed. Eleanor shielded Tommy, Holmes deflecting with cane-sharp words. But in the melee, a figure slipped away, shawl-clad vanishing into alleys. Another note fluttered down. Blood for bricks. The boy next if truth outs. As they retreated to the townhouse, bonds strained but unbreaking, Holmes stared into the parlor wall, inner journey churning. Mercy demanded risk, justice, revelation. Watson lit his pipe, smoke curling like unanswered prayers. The dark night deepened, breakthrough teasing at the edge. But the tempter's web tightened, pulling them toward the abyss. What if the widow's sin was but the surface, and the true horror breathed free? Rain lashed the windows of the Hargrove townhouse in Kensington, a relentless tattoo that mirrored the pounding in Holmes's temples as they gathered in the dimly lit drawing room. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp wool and pipe smoke. Watson's attempt at calm amid the storm outside and within. Eleanor Hargrove sat rigidly on the edge of a velvet settee, her black silk gown pooling like spilled ink. Tommy curled against her side, his small face buried in her skirts. The boy's fingers twisted the fabric, seeking anchor in the chaos that had upended their world. Lila Thorne paced near the fireplace, her lithe frame taut as a bowstring, cheeks flushed from the church confrontation, her Cockney fire still smouldering. Holmes stood before the parlor door, now sealed by police tape fluttering like a mocking banner, his gaunt fingers tracing the mortar lines with clinical precision. The wall she had built, Victor's tomb confessed in whispers to Father Michael's, whispered back secrets of its own. Cracks spiderwebbed faintly under his touch, not from age but something fresher, as if pressure built from within. He leaned closer, inhaling the faint acrid tang of lime and decay, his grey eyes narrowing. Watson watched from the armchair, moustache twitching with unease. Steady on, Holmes. Gregson's men have it cordoned. Tampering could land us all in irons. Gregson burst in then, his burly frame filling the doorway, rain dripping from his rumpled coat, red face glistening like polished beef. Warrants be damned. You lot scatter like rats from holy water. And now another note? Blood for bricks. The boy's next. He jabbed a thick finger at Eleanor, who flinched but held Tommy closer. Madam, your parlor palace hides more than a dead husband. We'll chisel it open at dawn. And God help you if Scotland Yard finds bones besides his. Eleanor's emerald eyes lifted, haunted but stealing with a resolve born of her confessional purge. Inspector, Victor's sins built that wall as much as my hands. He beat me, gambled our fortune, ruined lives. Lila's sister, Eliza, among them, bricked away years before in shame, before Lila came to us. Her voice cracked on the name, raw from truth's fresh wound, but she met Gregson's glare. I ended his tyranny, yes, but alive. Mercy faltered in my rage, yet grace. Father Michael spoke of fragments in Victor, perhaps mine too. Lila whirled, fists unclenching into trembling hands. Eliza, my blood, that monster. You knew, ma'am, all these years, serving tea while my sister's screams echoed in that cursed room. Her accent thickened with betrayal, words tumbling like alley stones. I scrubbed your floors, minded your boy, thinking you kind. But bricks for bricks now? Who's next? Me? Tommy? She glanced at the child, softening a fraction. Fellow sufferer recognizing kin. Tommy whimpered, peeking out. Mummy didn't mean bad. Papa was mean, locked me once. His small voice pierced the tension. Innocence cracking adult facades. Eleanor pulled him tight, tears tracing paths down porcelain cheeks. My love, no more locks. We're free now, or trying to be. Holmes turned sharply, dishevelled hair catching firelight. Enough fractures. The notes, the shawl figure, point to unfinished business. Eliza Thorne, Victor's indiscretion, bricked pre-Eleanor. Unlikely. Timelines clash. Parish records. Father Michael's hinted fragments. He paced, mind a whirlwind of deductions, but beneath stirred unfamiliar churn, Justice's cold scalpel dulling against Mercy's warmth. Watson, fetch my kit. We exhume truth before Gregson dynamites it. Watson rose, loyal limp echoing on Persian rugs. Holmes, this treads holy ground now. Confession's sacred. You're no priest. Gregson snorted, blocking the door. Consulting detective or no, you're sidelined. My men guard till morning. But as thunder rolled, a sharp crack split the air, not lightning, but from the parlor wall. Plaster dust sifted down. a fine powder like grave silt. All froze. Holmes pressed palm flat. Vibration hummed faint, rhythmic like labored breath. Impossible. Watson's pipe clattered to the floor. By Jove, it's alive. Lila screamed, dashing forward, nails scraping mortar. Eliza! Sis! Let me out! Hysteria gripped her, fellow traveller's pain mirroring Eleanor's own buried grief. Eleanor stood, wavering to Lila's side, hands joining in futile clawing. Perhaps not dead, my doing sealed him, but something moved before. Gregson bellowed for constables, but Holmes shoved past, violin case forgotten in the hall. Silence all. Listen. The pulse steadied, then ceased, leaving oppressive quiet. His hawkish nose flared. Chemical traces, chloroform residue. Victor drugged, walled conscious but survived longer, or accomplice within. Watson gripped Holmes's shoulder, voice low. The tempter plays us, that figure outside, pulling strings, dredging old sins to drown new hope. Faith's fight now, old chap. Your mind alone won't crack this. Holmes shrugged him off, but pause lingered in his eyes, detached genius brushing soul's edge. Perhaps not. Eleanor, your confession lit the path. Now we walk it together. Risk Dawn's dig or bait the shadow. She nodded. Lighter post-absolution, though shadows clung together. For Tommy, for Eliza's memory. Night deepened, rain easing to drizzle. They barricaded in the drawing room. Watson brewing tea strong as resolve, its steam curling like prayers unanswered yet. Lila sat by Tommy, stories of lost sisters weaving fragile bonds, her rage yielding to shared ache. Gregson posted guards, muttering of headlines. Widow's wall breathes horror. Holmes alone at window. Fog-shrouded Kensington streets below gas lamps, flickering like faltering faith. Inner journey twisted. Truth's pursuit, clashing law's hammer, mercy's whisper. What breathed in the wall? Victor's ghost, Eliza's vengeance, or sin's echo demanding reckoning? A shawl fluttered distant alley, tempter vanishing again. Note pinned to sill, undiscovered yet. Mercy bricks souls, too. As candle guttered low, Holmes turned to the group, voice steady but laced uncharacteristic warmth. Rest now. Dawn unmasks all. But in his chest, vice tightened. Not intellect's puzzle, but heart's gamble. Watson caught his glance, nodding. The struggle peaks, friend. Grace or abyss? Outside footsteps splashed away, hook of pursuit dangling. What if the wall held not one horror but legion, and the tempter held the key? If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. Dawn crept over Kensington like a hesitant confessor, grey light seeping through the fog-bound windows of Hargrove House, turning the drawing room into a tableau of weary vigil. Holmes stood motionless by the parlor door, his lean frame silhouetted against the peeling wallpaper, fingers steepled under his chin as if communing with the bricks beyond. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp plaster and cooling tea, undercut by that faint rhythmic whisper from the wall. Inhale, exhale, a mockery of life that had gnawed at them through the night. Watson stirred from his armchair, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his moustache twitching with unspoken worry. Old chap, you look like you've wrestled phantoms. Did sleep evade you too? Holmes's grey eyes flicked toward him, sharp as flint. Sleep is for those unburdened by enigmas, John. This. Respiration persists. Not mechanical. Not illusory. Vital, perhaps. We proceed. Eleanor Hargrove descended the stairs then, her black silk rustling softly, emerald eyes brighter than the night before, yet rimmed with fresh resolve. Tommy trailed her, the boy's small hand in hers, his face pale but set, Lila Thorne close behind with a tray of bread and cheese. The maid's lithe form moved with quiet grace, her dark curls escaping a hasty cap, but her gaze darted to the parlor door like one who'd heard too many secrets in these halls. Mrs. Hargrove, Holmes said, his voice a low timbre that cut the tension. The hour is upon us. Inspector Gregson arrives shortly with men and tools. Your strength honors the dead and the living. She met his stare, chin lifting. For Eliza, Mr. Holmes. And Victor. whatever truth lies there. No more walls between us and it. Gregson burst in minutes later, his burly frame filling the doorway, red face flushed from the chill morning. Right then. Lestrade's lot are sniffing about, but this is mine. Hammers, chisels, lamps. Let's crack the devil open. Men, form up. The workers, rough-hewn labourers from the yard, filed in with clanging tools, their boots thudding on the Persian rugs. Holmes directed them with precise gestures, positioning lanterns to pierce the gloom, his mind a whirlwind beneath the calm facade. The breathing grew audible now in the hush, a wet rasp that turned stomachs. Watson felt it in his war-hardened gut, an echo of battlefield moans, pulling at old scars. As the first chisel bit into mortar, dust cascaded like ash from a funeral pyre. Eleanor clutched Tommy close, the boy whispering, "Mummy, is Daddy in there?" Angry. "Hush, love," she murmured, though her voice cracked. "Whatever's there, we'll face it with open eyes." Lila hovered at the periphery, her fingers twisting her apron, eyes shadowed by memories unspoken. She'd served here since girlhood, seen Victor's rages, Eliza's silent tears. This unbricking felt like exhuming her own buried fears. The wall yielded grudgingly, chunks tumbling free, revealing scarred lath beneath. Holmes leaned in, inhaling deeply. Earth, decay, and something sharper, medicinal. Chloroform confirmed. But layered with urine, sweat, prolonged confinement. A gasp rippled through the room as the hole widened enough for a lantern's glow to probe inside. There, slumped against the far wall, was a form, human, desiccated. Clad in Victor Hargrove's favoured grey wool suit, bearded face frozen in a grimace of agony, eyes milky voids staring out. But not alone. Curled beside him, smaller, skeletal remains in a child's nightgown, tiny hands outstretched, as if reaching for salvation. "Eliza!" Eleanor breathed, collapsing to her knees, sobs wrenching free. "My baby girl." "Oh God, what have I done?" Gregson swore under his breath, signalling his men back. "Bloody hell, Holmes, double murder. The industrialist and his daughter bricked alive." "Motive? You knew, widow." Holmes held up a hand, his hawkish nose inches from the cavity, ignoring the fetor. "Not murder. Observe. The child's bones show no trauma but malnourishment. Victor's skull fractures post-mortem, likely from collapse. They were. Imprisoned. Starved. But breathing? That rasp." From deeper within came a faint scuffle, then a whimper. Alive. The group froze as Holmes thrust his arm through, fingers brushing fabric. "Pull back," he commanded himself silently, but truth demanded more. He widened the breach, lantern swinging wild. Curled in the farthest recess, wedged behind the father's corpse, was another figure. Emaciated, filth-caked, clad in rags that might once have been a footman's livery. A man, youngish, 30s perhaps, chest heaving with that persistent rhythm, eyes wild with terror as light hit him. "James!" Lila cried, lunging forward before Watson could restrain her. James Whittaker, the under-butler, missing these 5 years, whispered to have fled with stolen silver. Holmes extracted him carefully, the man collapsing into Watson's arms, babbling incoherently. Water. Walls. The master said it'd end. Promised air. Gregson bellowed for a surgeon, but Holmes knelt, voice steady. "Whittaker, focus. How long? Who sealed you?" The man's lips cracked, words tumbling. "Victor. Rage." After Eliza sickened. "Blamed me. The poisons I fetched. Laudanum for her, chloroform for his. Experiments. Bricked us to hide shame. But he came back nights taunting. Said Grace wouldn't find us here. Then screams. Collapse. Darkness. Thought I died too." Eleanor's face drained of colour, piecing fragments. Victor's vices, opium dens, illicit trials on the vulnerable. Eliza, his own blood, collateral in his madness. And James, loyal till betrayed. But Holmes's mind raced ahead, sifting anomalies. Victor bricked them, yet the note last night warned of mercy bricking souls. The tempter's shadow outside, the shawl-clad figure evading pursuit. Not ghosts, but flesh. Whittaker breathed because he endured, barely. But who orchestrated the discovery now? And why? Watson helped the survivor to a settee, wrapping him in blankets, his own heart aching with the raw humanity of it. Holmes, this shatters everything. Eleanor didn't kill, she covered or was deceived. She nodded through tears, holding Tommy tight. Victor lied to me. Said they fled. Embezzlers. I bricked to bury scandal, not bodies. Forgiveness. Can it reach this? Holmes paced, disheveled hair catching lantern light, his detachment fracturing. Truth unmasks, Mrs. Hargrove, but leaves wreckage. Law demands charges, concealment at least. Yet grace. Watson speaks of it. My intellect balks, but perhaps... Gregson interrupted, cuffing Whittaker lightly to rouse him. Enough. All to the yard. Holmes, your games end here. But as they moved to escort a crash from the alley, glass-shattering shouts. Holmes bolted to the window, spotting the shawl figure fleeing into fog. Clutching a satchel that glinted with pilfered evidence, bricks, notes, perhaps Hargrove's hidden ledger. Pursue, Holmes snapped, grabbing his deerstalker. The tempter flees with keys to deeper sins. Watson followed, revolver drawn, heart pounding with loyalty's fire. Eleanor watched them go, whispering to Lila and the fragile James. Community now, in ruins rebuilt. The chase wound through gaslit alleys, fog swallowing clues, Holmes's long strides eating distance, mind ablaze. Not justice's hammer, but mercy's scalpel needed. Yet the figure vanished at the Thames docks, leaving only a whisper on the wind. More walls crumble. Back at Hargrove House, as surgeons tended James, Eleanor knelt by the parlor breach, touching Eliza's tiny bones with trembling fingers. Redemption's path steepened. What if Victor's accomplices lived, pulling strings from shadows? And Holmes, racing into dawn's uncertainty, felt his own soul's vice tighten, genius alone insufficient against sin's legion. In the distance, a church bell tolled matins, calling to confession unmet. What ledger did the tempter hold, and whose soul would it damn next? Holmes's boots pounded the slick cobblestones of the Thames docks, the fog coiling like a living shroud around rusted cranes and crates stacked like forgotten tombs. Salt air stung his nostrils, mingled with the rot of fish guts and sewage from the river's murky belly. Watson huffed behind him, revolver steady in his grip. The slight limp from Afghanistan, a nagging reminder of old wounds that never fully healed. There, the shawl figure darted between barrels, satchel swinging, glinting under a sputtering gas lamp. Holmes's mind raced ahead, piecing fragments. The pilfered bricks etched with initials VH. Hargrove's scrawled ledger notes glimpsed in the parlor's dust. Not mere theft, but erasure of a deeper fraud. Victor's empire built on blood money from child laborers hidden away. "Stop!" Holmes bellowed, voice cutting the mist like a violin string snapping. Pursuit of truth tolerates no shadows. The figure stumbled, hood slipping to reveal matted grey hair and a scarred cheek. Mrs. Agnes Whittaker, Victor's longtime bookkeeper, eyes wild with cornered desperation. She clutched the satchel to her chest, backing toward the wharf's edge where the Thames churned black and indifferent. "You meddling devil," she spat, voice gravelly from years of gin and lies. "Victor's gone, but his secrets stay buried. That parlor wall was my doing too. Bricks to seal the truth of his wee charges, the orphans he starved for profit." Watson's revolver clicked, aimed steady. "Drop it, madam. No more running. Scotland Yard will have answers." Holmes held up a hand, grey eyes piercing her facade. "Answers I already possess, Mrs. Whittaker. The ledger's ink matches your fountain pen at Hargrove House. Victor didn't just lie to his wife. He forged your exile papers, claiming embezzlement to discard you like refuse. But you returned loyal to a ghost, pilfering evidence to protect what? His rotting legacy." She laughed, a hollow bark echoing off the water. "Loyal. He owned me, Holmes. Beat the debts into my bones. Those children, Tommy's kin, Eliza among them, witnessed the ledgers. Victor panicked, paid passage for survivors to vanish overseas, bricked the parlor to hush the screams that never came. Eleanor knew Scraps believed his tale of flight. But I tallied every shilling stolen from their mouths." Watson's face paled. mustache twitching with disgust. Children for profit? God forgive such monsters. Whitaker's eyes darted to the river, temptation's pull evident in her trembling stance. Forgiveness? Victor mocked it, quoting scripture twisted for gain. Join him in hell, or hand it over. Holmes stepped closer, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the fog lamps, hawkish nose casting a shadow like judgment's finger. Truth is no demon, madam. It liberates, however painfully. The satchel holds redemption's map. For you, for Eleanor, for the living ghosts like young James. She hurled a crate at them, splintering wood as Holmes dodged with unnatural grace. Watson fired a warning shot into the air, the crack shattering the night. Whitaker bolted again, but her foot caught a rope coil, sending her sprawling. The satchel flew open, papers scattering like confetti into the Thames, some snagging on pilings, ink bleeding into the current. "No," she wailed, scrambling on hands and knees, nails black with dock grime. Holmes knelt amid the chaos, salvaging sodden pages. Manifests listing orphan shipments. Victor's signature bold and damning. Enough to indict a dozen accomplices, but fragments only. Names redacted, dates blurred. Whitaker lunged for the rest, but Watson pinned her gently, handcuffs from Gregson's earlier kit clicking shut. "It's over," Holmes murmured, folding the papers into his coat. Yet never truly, for sin's ripples endure. Back at Hargrove House in Kensington's hushed opulence, Eleanor sat by the parlor breach, lantern light flickering over Eliza's tiny skeleton, now covered in a white shroud. Surgeons having confirmed death by neglect, not violence, months before the bricking. Lila Thorne knelt beside her, the young maid's lithe frame shaking as she stroked James's, Tommy's true name, revealed in delirium, fevered brow. The boy, no older than 10, murmured of dark cellars and Victor's belt, his frail chest rising in shallow rhythm. "Mrs. Hargrove," Lila whispered, her Cockney lilt soft as prayer, "you bricked for love of family name." Victor twisted that too, but Grace. It finds cracks in walls. Eleanor's emerald eyes, rimmed red, lifted to the stained glass window depicting a shepherd and lost lamb, colours muted in pre-dawn grey. "Grace? I entombed innocence, Lila. James lives because you smuggled food through vents. My hands are as stained as Victor's." Gregson paced the Persian rug, rumpled suit damp from the night's damp bulldog face flushed with frustration. "Holmes'll bring the witch back, mark my words. Charges stack. Conspiracy, concealment. Your widow's tears won't sway a judge." James stirred, voice a rasp. "The lady in shawl. Promised Pa's gold if quiet. But Eliza. She cried for Mum." Eleanor's heart clenched, porcelain skin paling further. Whitaker. Victor's shadow pulling even from exile. The front door burst open as dawn crept through fog, Holmes and Watson escorting the dishevelled Whitaker. Satchel remnants clutched in Holmes's fist. Gregson whirled. What fresh devilry! Holmes ignored him, striding to Eleanor, laying the papers before her like a confessor's offering. The ledger's heart, partially saved. Victor's fraud spanned docks to factories, orphans as collateral. Whitaker tallied it all, bricked to silence, but returned when rumours of demolition stirred old fears. Whitaker slumped into a chair, defiance crumbling. He said, "Bury it all. Eleanor, you were blind, not wicked. Forgive? Even I crave it now." Eleanor rose, black silk whispering, haunted eyes meeting Whitaker's scarred ones. Blindness is no absolution. But James lives, Eliza rests. Perhaps. Walls fall for mercy's sake. Holmes watched, his detachment pierced by the scene's raw humanity, mind whirling not just deductions but uncharted emotions. Watson clapped his shoulder, blue eyes kind. "See, old chap? Truth heals as it wounds." Gregson snorted, signalling constables. To the yard, all accounts settled there. No parlour theatrics. As Whitaker was led away, she twisted back. One page missing, the one naming Victor's yard mole. Corruption higher than you dream, Holmes. Holmes's piercing gaze narrowed, pulse quickening. Gregson? No, deeper. Seeds of greater rot. Eleanor turned to the boy, lifting him gently, Lila aiding with motherly care. Community in crisis, forging anew. Outside, church bells pealed fully now, calling Kensington's faithful to matins. Holmes stepped into the street, fog lifting to reveal gaslit facades gilded in sunrise. Watson joined him, revolver holstered. A mole in the yard, Holmes muttered. Victor's web ensnares the law itself. And Eleanor's path to amends? Steeper still, with James's testimony pending. Watson's limp echoed on the stones as they walked toward Baker Street. Faith in justice wavers, Holmes. But in grace, it endures. Holmes nodded faintly, dishevelled hair tousled by breeze, soul's vice loosening imperceptibly. Yet as a hansom clattered past, a newsboy's cry pierced the air. Factory fire in Whitechapel, dozens trapped, Hargrove Mills ablaze. Holmes froze. Sabotage, or the mole striking first? The restoration dangled by a thread scorched at both ends. Flames roared like the judgment of old gods, devouring the skeletal timbers of the Hargrove Mills in Whitechapel. Sherlock Holmes pushed through the choking throng of soot-streaked workers, their faces twisted in grief and fury, the acrid bite of smoke clawing at his throat. Gas lamps flickered erratically against the night, casting hellish shadows on the Thames's oily expanse nearby, where barges laden with charred crates bobbed mournfully. Watson followed close, his limp more pronounced on the uneven cobbles slick with ash and runoff, revolver heavy in his coat pocket. Holmes's hawkish nose wrinkled at the stench, burnt cotton mingled with something sharper, chemical, unnatural for mere accident. Arson, without question. But whose hand? Victor Hargrove's ghost lingered in every smouldering beam, his frauds now pyres threatening to consume the living. Inspector Gregson barreled toward them, red face glistening under his helmet, bulldog jowls quivering with outrage. "Holmes, you vulture, circling before the yard even arrives. 12 dead already, orphans among them. Hargrove's sins catching fire, eh?" Holmes ignored the barb, kneeling amid the debris, gloved fingers sifting through twisted metal and blistered ledgers half consumed. Residue here, phosphorus traces quick igniting, sourced from the docks, Victor's old suppliers. And this, he murmured, lifting a singed scrap of paper, a manifest initialed by one E.L. Eleanor? No, to Pat. Her hand trembles differently. Watson steadied himself against a warped post, blue eyes scanning the chaos. The widow's name on every lip tonight. Rumours fly faster than flames. Says she torched it for revenge or insurance. James Whittaker's confession implicated her ledgers too. Gregson's laugh barked harsh. Confessions break under heat, Watson. She's at Kensington now, barricaded with that chit Lila and the boy. My men watch her. Mole or no, Victor's widow dances on embers. Holmes rose, grey eyes piercing the gloom like scalpels. Your men? Gregson, or Victor's? Whittaker's missing page named a yard insider, facilitating bribes from these very docks. The fire erases evidence before we unearth it. The inspector bristled, rumpled suit straining. Lies from a bricked-up madman. Prove it, or stay out of my blaze. As Gregson stormed off barking orders, Holmes's mind raced, a vortex of clues pulling him deeper. Detachment, his armor, cracked further. The orphan's cries echoed not as data, but as human frailty, mirroring Eleanor's own buried wreckage. Grace, Watson had called it earlier. Absurd, yet the church bells from distant steeples tolled now, mocking his logic. They hailed a hansom, the horse snorting at the smoke and rattled back toward Kensington. Holmes leaned forward, dishevelled hair whipping in the chill wind slicing through the carriage. The parlour's secrets multiply. Whittaker silenced years ago, yet returns naming moles. Eleanor complicit in fraud, not murder. But this fire, retaliation from the web's heart. Watson nodded, moustache twitching thoughtfully. You've pierced her facade, old chap. That moment in the parlour, her eyes meeting his. Mercy's seed took root. But James, the boy. Testimony looms at trial. Family's forgiveness hangs by threads scorched like those mills. The carriage jolted to a halt outside Hargrove House, its Georgian facade looming stern under gaslight, ivy clawing the bricks like desperate fingers. Lila Thorne answered the knocker, her lithe frame tense in starched apron, freckled face pale, dark curls escaping her cap. "Mr. Holmes, sir." Ma'am's beside herself. Newsboys shouted the fire, folks point fingers here. Inside, the parlor gaped altered, wallpaper stripped where Whitaker had been walled, fresh plaster stark white amid black silk drapes. Eleanor Hargrove paced, raven chignon loosened, emerald eyes wild with unshed tears, porcelain skin flushed. Victor's mills, my mills now. Orphans gone because of his greed, and they blame me. Holmes stepped forward, voice measured as a metronome. The phosphorus came from his dock's contacts. Someone with access struck the match, perhaps to bury the fraud ledgers Whitaker tallied. Your name appears, Mrs. Hargrove, but forged. Tell me of E.L. She halted, haunted gaze locking on his. Eliza's initials, my daughter, lost to fever 3 years past. Victor used her stationery for decoys. I knew fragments turned blind eye for security. James saw more, hid in walls, fearing reprisal. Lila hovered near the boy, James Whitaker, no kin, but Whitaker's nephew, orphaned by Victor's schemes, barely 10 with scarred cheeks and wide, fearful eyes. Aunt Eleanor saved me, he whispered, clutching a wooden soldier. Uncle James said, tell truth now. Eleanor's hand trembled on his shoulder, black silk sighing. Truth costs, Mr. Holmes. Scotland Yard circles. Gregson thirsts for my arrest. Community whispers. Church ladies who once called shun us. Watson interjected gently, kind eyes warm. Faith's community endures trials, ma'am. Father Michaels at St. Mary's spoke of prodigal returns. You've begun amends. Whitaker freed, ledgers surrendered. Holmes paced the room, pipe unlit between thin lips, mind dissecting motives. Yet the mole persists. Gregson dismisses it, but signatures match yard logs I've glimpsed. Deeper rot. Perhaps Lestrade's rival ambitions fueled by bribes. A knock thundered. Constables Gregson at 4, burly frame filling the door. Mrs. Hargrove, you're wanted at the yard. Fire evidence points here, your manifest. Eleanor straightened, poise fracturing to resolve. Lead on, Inspector, but truth braves flames too. Holmes blocked the path subtly, gaunt frame unyielding. Evidence or expedience? Release her pending my report or face the missing pages' revelations. Gregson sneered, red face purpling. Overreach, Holmes. She's complicit. As tension coiled, Lila stepped forward unexpectedly, voice steady despite youth. Wait. James drew this last night after Uncle's words. She held a childish sketch. A burly man with bulldog face, handing coins to a bearded shadow. Victor, beneath mill sketches aflame. Gregson's eyes bulged, pretense crumbling. Child's fancy. Holmes snatched it, pulse surging. Ink fresh. Details precise. Your cufflinks, Inspector. Engraved G.Y. Guilty Yard. The boy witnessed drop-offs. Chaos erupted. Constables shifting loyalties. Gregson lunging for the paper. Watson drew revolver steady, limp forgotten in adrenaline. Stand down. Eleanor shielded James, emerald eyes fierce. Enough walls, Inspector. Yours crumbles now. Gregson backed toward the door, bluster failing. This proves nothing. Lies! But Holmes's voice sliced cold. It proves complicity. Arrest him, constables, or shall I summon Lestrade? The inspector fled into the fog-shrouded night, curses trailing. Silence fell, heavy as ash. Eleanor sank to settee, tears tracing porcelain cheeks. One thread severed, but Victor's web tangles further. My trial. Holmes knelt, uncharacteristic gentleness in grey eyes. Threads unravel with persistence and grace. Whitaker sought it. You offer it to James. Watson smiled faintly. Comment who you suspect, friends. Can you solve it first? Gregson fallen, but shadows linger. Outside, church bells pealed midnight, a balm amid ruin. Lila brewed tea, steam curling like prayers, community knitting fragile bonds. James clutched Eleanor, boyish trust reborn. Yet Holmes stared into the hearth's dying embers, detachment warring with newfound empathy. The fire's true architect eluded, Victor's silent partner perhaps alive, plotting from higher perches. A telegram boy rattled the door, dispatch from Baker Street. Urgent. Mrs. Hudson reports intruder, your room's ransacked. Intruder. Sabotage escalated. Holmes's sanctuary breached, secrets at risk. The struggle deepened, restoration's path veined with fresh peril. Watson's hand gripped his shoulder, steadfast. Together, Holmes. Law bends, but truth and mercy hold. Holmes nodded, soul's vice twisting anew, transformation's fire kindling within. But as they stepped into the lifting fog, a carriage shadowed them, unmarked, ominous. Pursuit. Or ally veiled. The Kensington widow's parlor, once tomb, now crucible. What wept within its walls threatened to engulf them all. The fog clung to the cobblestones like a shroud as Holmes, Watson and Eleanor hurried toward the waiting hansom cab, James bundled close to his mother's side, Lila trailing with a lantern's feeble glow. The unmarked carriage lingered at the street's bend, its horses stamping restlessly, driver hooded against the chill. Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, calculating trajectories in the mist-shrouded gloom. Not pursuit, yet. But the telegram burned in his pocket, Mrs. Hudson's frantic script warning of violation in his sanctum. They rattled through Kensington's opulent avenues, gas lamps flickering like dying stars, the Thames's dank breath seeping through carriage cracks. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, limp a distant memory in the surge of loyalty. Eleanor held James tight, her raven chignon frayed, emerald eyes reflecting the inner tempest, relief at Gregson's flight warring with the terror of exposure. Victor's secrets bricked away in the parlor, now clawed free, demanding reckoning. Baker Street emerged from the haze, 221B's familiar bow windows dark. A constable posted awkwardly at the stoop. Mrs. Hudson flung open the door before they alighted, her plump face ashen, apron twisted in knotted fists. "Oh, Mr. Holmes, it's a mercy you're here." The place turned upside down, papers everywhere, that violin of yours smashed to splinters. Holmes pushed past, coat swirling, ascending stairs two at a time. The sitting room struck him like a physical blow. Violin shards glittered on the Persian rug, chemical apparatus toppled, vials shattering acrid scents of ether and morphine into the air. His index books splayed open, pages torn, the Persian slipper emptied of tobacco. But worse, the alcove safe ajar, Hargrove dossier rifled. Eleanor's letters, Victor's ledgers, the bricked parlor sketches gone. Watson surveyed the wreckage, mustache twitching. Gregson's doing, or that shadow carriage. Holmes knelt amid the debris, gaunt fingers sifting like a surgeon probing wounds. No, subtler hand. Footprints too light for Gregson's bulldog tread. Scent of cologne. Sandalwood expensive. Victor's partner lives, Watson. The guilty yard manifests not in drops, but in ledgers funneled to higher echelons. Eleanor gasped, porcelain skin paling further. Parliament? One of father's associates? James peered from the doorway, boyish curiosity piercing fear. Like the man in the parlor sketches, the one with the club foot. Silence gripped the room, heavy as the fog outside. Holmes rose, hawkish nose flaring. Clubfoot. The seed planted weeks ago in your whispers, Mrs. Hargrove. Lord Alistair Blackwood, Victor's silent investor, whispered in factory ledgers, evading Scotland Yard's net. Lila set down the lantern, her lithe frame tense, scullery memories surfacing. "I served tea at those meetings, sir. Blackwood's cane-tapping rhythms on the parlor floor. Morse code. For shipments." Holmes's mind whirred, detachment cracking under empathy's strain. Morse, guilty yard signals. Blackwood orchestrated the drops, Victor the muscle, Gregson the blind eye for promotion. But the bricking, your act, Eleanor, sealed not just bodies, but evidence. Blackwood returns to silence loose ends. Watson steadied his cane, blue eyes resolute. "Then we go to him, tonight. End this web." Eleanor shook her head. Tears glistening. No more violence. Victor's path led there, greed cloaked as ambition. "I've wrecked enough. James deserves amends, not vengeance." Holmes turned, uncharacteristic softness in his gaze. Amends demand confrontation, yet grace tempers the blade. You've reached out. Now community fortifies. Mrs. Hudson, tea, and call the Reverend from St. Mary's. Prayer steadies what logic alone frays. As dawn greyed the windows, Reverend Lila Thorne, Lila's uncle, stout with kind whiskers, arrived, Bible in hand. The group gathered amid ruins, James's small hand in Eleanor's, Watson's arm around her shoulder. Thorne's voice rumbled low, invoking forgiveness amid shadowed deeds. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Holmes stood apart, dishevelled hair catching first light, inner vice loosening. Truth pursued intellectually fractured souls. Now mercy mended them. He'd chronicled crimes, detached observer. But here, in Baker Street's violation, his own sanctuary breached, he glimpsed wreckage mirrored, addiction to the puzzle, isolation's cold grip. Blackwood's carriage sighted, Watson murmured, peering through curtains, circling the square. Holmes nodded. The final test beckons. Eleanor, your confession to me, extend it. Confront him with truth unveiled, not force. They spilled into the street, fog lifting to reveal Blackwood's brougham halted before a mews. The lord emerged, club foot dragging, silver hair gleaming under top hat, cane glinting. Hargrove's widow, he sneered, voice oiled silk. Come to gloat. Victor's folly buries you all. Helena stepped forward, James behind her skirts, voice steady despite trembling. No gloating, my lord. Confession. The parlor bricks hid your shipments, opium bricks from the yard, wealth laundered through factories. I bricked it to end the horror, protect my son. But grace demands I unbrick now for justice, true justice. Blackwood's face twisted, cane raised. Lies. Gregson swore. Gregson, Holmes interjected, grey eyes piercing. Fled like vermin. Your letters from my safe, proof of payoffs. Yield, or Lestrade awaits with warrants. Watson flanked him, revolver holstered but presence iron. Stand down, Blackwood. Redemption's door opens, even for architects of ruin. The lord faltered, club foot buckling, eyes darting to escape. Lila emerged from shadows, lantern high. I saw you, my lord. Every drop-off, no more hiding. Reverend Thorne laid a hand on Blackwood's arm. Son, walls crumble, confess, find mercy. Blackwood sank against the brougham, cane clattering, sobs racking his frame. Victor promised discretion. The yard's corruption fed us all. Opium for the elite, wealth unending. But the boy, James, saw too much. The bricking. Mercy. Eleanor knelt. Emerald eyes meeting his. Mercy wove with truth. Surrender for James, for all wrecked souls. Constables arrived, summoned by Mrs. Hudson's bells, cuffing Blackwood gently as he whispered prayers, Thorne murmured. The web unravelled in morning light, guilty yard dissolving into daylight's grace. Yet as Blackwood was led away, he rasped to Holmes. One thread remains. The widow's parlour holds more. A final brick, loose. Weeps still. Holmes froze. Transformation's fire tested anew. Restoration neared, but peril veiled in reconciliation's shadow. James tugged Eleanor's hand. Mummy. Home? Unbrick together? She nodded, hugging him. Family bonds mending amid Kensington's awakening streets. Watson clapped Holmes's shoulder. Progress, old friend. But Holmes's gaze fixed on 221B's dark windows. The smashed violin echoed his fractured detachment. Helping another, Blackwood, Eleanor, stirred uncharted empathy. Community knit them, yet the weeping brick beckoned, final test looming. They returned to Hargrove House, Parlor's bricked wall mocking in sunlight. Holmes tapped gently, hollow echo. Inside something shifted, dust sifting like tears. The true heart of Victor's empire. Or redemption's last gift. As tools gathered, a child's drawing fluttered from James's pocket. Parlor scene, bricks weeping blood red. Innocent vision or prophetic warning. The restoration teetered, grace and grit entwined, shadows whispering one final twist. Sunlight slanted through the tall sash windows of Hargrove House, casting long shadows across the parlor floor like fingers reaching for secrets long buried. Holmes knelt before the bricked-up wall, his lean fingers tracing the mortar lines, each tap of his knuckle sending a faint, hollow resonance through the room. Dust motes danced in the beams, and the air hung heavy with the scent of aged plaster and faint, underlying rot, something organic, weeping its slow decay into the stones. Eleanor stood nearby, her black silk gown whispering against the Persian rug, emerald eyes fixed on the wall as if it pulsed with her late husband's ghost. James clung to her skirt, his small face pale, clutching the crumpled drawing that now seemed less childish scribble and more omen. Watson hovered with a crowbar and chisel, his mustache twitching with unease. "Old chap, are you certain? This could bring the whole structure down, or worse, whatever's behind it." Holmes didn't look up, his hawkish nose inches from the bricks, grey eyes narrowing. "Certainty is for lesser minds, Watson, but the echo betrays hollowness, and that sift of powder earlier suggests movement. Something shifts behind this barrier, alive or lamenting." Reverend Thorne entered from the hall, his footsteps soft on the creaking boards, carrying a small leather Bible worn smooth by years of desperate hands. Lila followed, her lithe frame tense, lantern still in hand from the night's revelations. The maid's freckled cheeks flushed as she glanced at the wall. "I sealed it myself after the lad saw. Master Victor's orders. Bricks to hide the shame." Eleanor reached out, touching Lila's arm gently. "You acted out of fear, child, we all did. But fear builds poor walls." The Reverend nodded, his voice a gravelly anchor in the rising tension. "And the Lord tears down what man erects in haste." Ecclesiastes reminds us, "To everything there is a season." Holmes, proceed with care. This house holds more than mortar. Holmes selected the chisel, positioning it at a seam near the base where mortar had crumbled soft. With controlled strikes, he worked the blade in, chips flying like brittle tears. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill draft from the garden doors. Each pry widened the gap, revealing darkness within, a void that exhaled cool, musty breath, carrying hints of earth and something sweeter, cloying, opium residue, perhaps mingled with decay. James whimpered, burying his face in Eleanor's skirts. "Mummy, the crying bricks, like in my picture." She stroked his hair, her voice steady but laced with tremor. "Hush, love. We're setting it free." As the first brick loosened, Holmes levered it free with a grunt, handing it to Watson. Inside, not the expected cache of Den's ledgers or smuggled vials, but a narrow alcove, makeshift shelf of rough planks supporting a cluster of small, cloth-wrapped bundles. He reached in carefully, pulling one free, unwrapping it to reveal a porcelain doll, its china face cracked, eyes glassy and vacant, stained with dark streaks that wept downward in rivulets long dried. Watson leaned closer. Good heavens, a child's toy? But why hide it? More bundles followed, tiny shoes caked in mud, a lock of auburn hair tied with faded ribbon, a silver rattle etched with initials. J. H. Holmes paused, the pieces slotting into his relentless mind. James Hargrove. But these are not yours, boy. Older from another time. Eleanor's breath caught, hand flying to her mouth. Victor. He spoke of a previous marriage, a daughter lost to fever before we wed. Eliza. But these relics, why brick them away? Lila gasped, stepping forward. Not fever, Mum, I overheard. The opium haze took her. Little one wandered into a den, one of Master Victor's own. They found her cold by the Thames. He couldn't bear the sight, walled it all up. Said it was his curse, leaking shame. Reverend Thorne's face hardened with sorrow. A father's grief twisted into silence. But walls don't heal, they fester, like Blackwood's empire built on such sorrows. Holmes delved deeper, fingers brushing something heavier, a leather journal, swollen with damp, pages fused but parting under his touch. Victor's hand, erratic script, debts to the yard, shipments from Limehouse, Blackwood's cut. And then the heart of it. Eliza's final hours, hallucinations from the pipe, my fault for leaving the door. The bricking was my penance, but it weeps. Condensation from the river, damp, staining all it touches. James saw, innocent eyes piercing my veil. Must silence. The room fell still, save for the soft drip now audible from the alcove, water seeping through cracks, pooling on the floorboards like penitential tears. Holmes closed the journal, his usual detachment cracking, a flicker of something raw crossing his sharp features. Not mere vice, Watson. A cascade of human frailty, greed birthing neglect, neglect birthing death, death-birthing walls of denial. Victor entombed his guilt here, and it wept through the years, staining the innocent. Watson placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've unravelled it, Holmes. The widow's parlour holds no empire, only echoes of loss. Redemption begins with exposure." But Eleanor knelt by the alcove, lifting the doll tenderly, tears tracing her porcelain cheeks. My stepdaughter, unknown to me. Victor never spoke her name. All those nights, his rages. This was the root. Oh, God. Forgive the silence we all kept. James peered in, unafraid now, touching the rattle. "For Eliza? She wants out, Mummy. Like me, from the dark." Reverend Thorne gathered them close, his voice rising in quiet prayer. "Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom." Lila joined, her voice soft Cockney lilt weaving in, "Amen." No more hiding. Holmes stood apart, violin case still smashed in his mind's eye from nights past, the strings' silence mirroring his inner tumult. He had chased truths of intellect, but this, familial wreckage, grace-piercing stone, stirred uncharted depths. Empathy, unwanted yet insistent, bloomed amid the dust. Was this his transformation? Not in solving, but in witnessing souls mend? Inspector Gregson burst through the front door then, ruddy face flushed, hat askew. "Holmes! Blackwood's confessed all right enough, but he's raving of a loose end here. Said the widow's parlour weeps blood, Scotland Yard's arriving to seal it. Evidence tampering, he claims." Eleanor's eyes flashed defiance. "No, Inspector. This weeps truth, not blood. Victor's sins exposed for healing." Gregson grumbled, but Holmes stepped forward, journal in hand. "Read it, man. Corruption's web ends not in seizure, but surrender. The Yard fed on this opium as much as Blackwood. Time for your own unbricking." The inspector took the volume, pages trembling in his grip, bulldog features softening to regret. "Blimey, my predecessor." I suspected. "All right, Holmes." But carefully now. As constables cordoned the parlour, Holmes watched the family. Eleanor embracing James and Lila, Reverend Thorne leading a circle of whispered thanks. Community's threads, pulling wreckage into wholeness. Watson grinned beside him. "See? Even geniuses evolve." Yet Holmes's gaze lingered on the alcove's depths, where one final bundle remained, wedged high, untouched. A glint of metal caught the light, perhaps a key or another relic. As tools reached up, a faint scratching echoed from within, not water but something alive. Rat or remnant stirring. The parlour's secrets weren't fully bricked away. Restoration beckoned, but one shadow clawed for release, testing Grace's final measure. Holmes's pulse quickened. Truth's pursuit, now laced with mercy's fragile hope. The constable's lanterns cast jittering shadows across the alcove's jagged mouth, where plaster dust still swirled like ghosts reluctant to depart. Holmes's keen eyes narrowed on that high wedge, the metallic glint winking mockingly amid the gloom. The scratching intensified, a deliberate scrape, not the skitter of vermin, but something insistent, alive with purpose. His mind raced through possibilities. A trapped animal, a forgotten mechanism, or worse, a human remnant clawing for air after years entombed. Watson edged closer, his mustache twitching with unease. Holmes, that sound. It's rhythmic, almost like Morse. Could Blackwood have hidden more than ledgers here? Eleanor Hargrove clutched James's arm, her emerald eyes wide but steady, the black silk of her gown dusted pale. "No more tombs," she whispered. "We've unearthed enough sins. Let it be." Reverend Thorne raised a calloused hand, his weathered face etched with the quiet authority of one who had preached redemption from far seedier pulpits. "Patience, Mrs. Hargrove. The Lord uncovers layer by layer, not in haste. Lila, fetch a longer pole from the garden shed, gently now." The young maidservant nodded, her lithe form slipping out into the fog-choked night, her Cockney footfalls fading on the gravel path of Hargrove Manor. James the son hovered protectively near his mother, his once boyish frame now taut with manhood's burdens, the factory scars on his hands a testament to the life Victor had forced upon him. Inspector Gregson barked orders, his bulldog jowls quivering. "Steady, lads, no rushing. Holmes here'll have my badge if we muck evidence." Holmes ignored the bluster, his gaunt frame leaning in, hawkish nose inches from the stone. The air from the crevice carried a faint, fetid sweetness. Not decay but incense long faded, mingled with the metallic tang of blood long dried. His pulse, usually a metronome of detachment, betrayed him with a staccato urgency. This was no mere relic. It pulsed with the story's withheld breath. Lila returned swiftly, pole in hand, her raven curls escaping her cap. "Here, Governor," she said, passing it to a constable. "Mind the edge. It's the one for unclogging the drains." The man prodded upward carefully, dislodging flakes of mortar. The scratching paused, then resumed, frantic now. Everyone froze as a small object tumbled free, a tarnished locket, spinning to the floor amid puffs of dust. It sprang open on impact, revealing twin portraits, a young Eleanor, radiant and unscarred, beside a cherubic infant, James perhaps, though younger than memory allowed. Eleanor's breath hitched. My locket, lost the night victor. She knelt, fingers trembling as she lifted it, the chain cold against her porcelain skin. Inside, etched faintly, to E, forever V, but beneath, scratched crudely, lies. Holmes retrieved it swiftly, his grey eyes dissecting the artifact. Not lost, hidden. Victor's handiwork, I'd wager. The scratches fresh against the age, but listen. The scraping renewed, deeper in. The constable jabbed again, and with a groan of stone yielding, a narrow panel shifted, outspilled a cascade, yellowed letters bound in faded ribbon, a child's wooden toy soldier, splintered and stained, and then a hand, pale, slender, nails broken, emerging like a drowned Ophelia rising from her weeds. Gasps rippled through the room. Lila screamed, short and sharp, before Reverend Thorne steadied her. "Easy, child. Light first." The hand withdrew abruptly, followed by a muffled sob, unmistakably human. Holmes's mind whirred. Dimensions of the alcove, 3 feet wide, 5 deep, space enough for a small form, curled, eternal. "Fetch a lantern close," he commanded, voice low thunder. And silence. Gregson blustered forward. "Bloody hell, Holmes, if this is murder." "Not murder," Holmes cut in. "Endurance." The constable angled the light, beam piercing the dark. There, huddled in the recess, was a woman, emaciated, wild-haired, clad in rags stiffened by years of grime. Her eyes, hollow but fierce, locked on the intruders. Not a ghost, but Miriam Blackwood, sister to the opium lord, presumed vanished a decade past. "Miriam?" Eleanor gasped, swaying. "Victor said you fled. After the accident." The woman coughed, voice a rasp unused to air. "Accident. Your husband's rage entombed me, Eleanor. Witness to his dealings with my brother. Opium dens, Scotland Yard bribes. He bricked me alive as warning. Food slipped through cracks, water from pipes. Till Grace forgot me. Watson's limp carried him nearer, medical instincts surging. She's dehydrated, starved. Easy now, miss, we've water." Reverend Thorne knelt, extending a flask. "Drink, sister. The Father's mercy reaches even here." Miriam sipped warily, her gaze flicking to Holmes. "You, the detective. Blackwood confessed to you? He sold me out for lighter sentence?" Holmes nodded, violin-calloused fingers pocketing the locket. "Your brother's web unravels, but yours, trapped not just by stone but silence, why not cry out sooner?" "Pride," she whispered. "Shame." Victor's ghost whispered through walls. "Speak and James pays. I heard your boy play soldier here alone while his father raged." James paled, stepping back. "I remember whispers. Thought it the house settling." Eleanor embraced her son fiercely. "No more ghosts, James. Miriam, forgive, we thought you gone." The woman's frame shook with sobs. Forgiveness. After years in dark, tasting mortar for meals. Yet, seeing you all unbricked. Perhaps. Gregson scratched his red pate. "This changes everything. Attempted murder, false reports. I'll have writs by dawn." Holmes held up a hand. "Dawn can wait. First, restoration." As Watson and Lila helped Miriam into the parlor's light, wrapping her in a blanket from the hall chest, the room's atmosphere shifted from tomb to sanctuary. Reverend Thorne gathered them in circle, his voice steady hymn, though I walk through the valley of shadow. Miriam joined haltingly, her rasp blending. Amen. Holmes observed from the periphery, dishevelled hair shadowing his piercing gaze. The intellect that dismantled empires of crime now confronted the empire of the soul, flawed vessels mending through improbable grace. Watson caught his eye, grinning faintly. Even you, Holmes. Moved. Irrelevant, Holmes murmured, though his chest tightened. Yet as Miriam clutched the locket, tracing the lies beneath forever, he pondered his own alcoves. Cases solved. But voids unsolved, empathy's stone wall within. Outside, fog thickened over Kensington's gaslit streets, muffling carriage wheels. But inside Hargrove Manor, light pierced anew. Gregson pocketed his notebook, softer now. Reckon the yard owes you, Holmes. And her. James approached Holmes quietly. Sir, that scratching, I felt it as a boy. You saved more than evidence. Holmes inclined his head. Truth saves, lad, but community sustains. As Miriam was led to a guest room, broth steaming on a tray, a final anomaly caught Holmes's eye. In the alcove's depths, beyond her former prison, a loose brick gleamed differently. Fresh mortar? No. Etched with a symbol, a cross, intertwined with opium poppy. Victor's final taunt, or divine irony. He reached for it, fingers brushing cold stone, when a low rumble echoed, not from the wall but the floorboards beneath. The parlor trembled faintly, dust sifting anew. Miriam froze in the doorway. That's the cellar grate. He kept the worst there. Holmes's pulse surged again, the web's root delved deeper, Mercy's test far from bricked. What lay below waiting to rise? Holmes's fingers froze on the etched brick, the cross and poppy mocking him in the dim lamplight. The rumble grew, a guttural vibration rising through the soles of his boots, stirring dust from the parlor's ornate cornice like spectral breath. Miriam's face drained of its fragile color, her blanket slipping as she pointed a trembling hand toward the floor. The cellar grate, he kept the worst there. Victor's secrets, the ones even I couldn't bury. Watson lunged forward, revolver half drawn from his coat, his limp forgotten in the surge. Steady on, Holmes. If it's structural. No, Holmes cut in sharply, his voice a scalpel through the tremor. Structural yields no malice. This pulses with intent. Reverend Thorne, your light. Lila, fetch the parlor poker. James, bar the doors. No uninvited guests. The group moved as one, a makeshift phalanx forged in the manor's shadowed heart. Lila returned with the iron rod, her lithe arms straining under its weight, eyes wide but resolute. Reverend Thorne lifted his lantern high, its flame dancing shadows across Miriam's haunted features. Gregson grumbled but complied, his bulldog bulk heaving the heavy oak door shut with a resonant thud. Holmes knelt by the grate, a wrought-iron relic half concealed under faded Persian rug. He pried at its rusted edge with his fingertips, nails blackening as metal bit skin. It gave with a screech, revealing a black maw exhaling dank air, thick with mold, and something sharper. Opium smoke, faint but unmistakable, laced with the metallic tang of fear sweat long dried. Descending single file, Holmes first, the stone steps spiraled into abyss. Each footfall echoed unnaturally, amplified by walls slick with condensation. Watson followed, breath ragged, muttering prayers under his breath from his army days. Miriam refused to stay above, clutching the locket like a talisman, her rasp whispering, "I should have known." The scratching, it came from here too, nights when he thought me asleep. The cellar unfolded into a cavernous vault, vaults of Hargrove Manor's underbelly. Once wine stores, now a labyrinth of crates and cobwebbed beams. The air hung heavy, oppressive, forcing shallow breaths. Reverend Thorne's lantern swung, casting elongated spectres that clawed at the low ceiling. In the corner, a makeshift altar, opium pipes clustered like serpents, residue-blackened bowls gleaming dully, beside ledgers bound in cracked leather. Victor's clandestine trade, smuggling from Limehouse dens to Kensington salons. But the rumble's source lay central, a bricked-up archway, Mortar fresh as the alcove above, etched with the same poppy cross. Holmes traced it, pulse thundering in his temples. "Watson, your stethoscope. Listen." Watson pressed the instrument to the stone, face paling. Heartbeat, faint, erratic, like a trapped animal. Miriam gasped, staggering against Lila's support. No, not another. Holmes seized the poker, swinging with calculated fury. Chips flew, mortar crumbling under relentless assault. Gregson joined, brute strength heaving stones free until a gap yawned, exhaling fetid warmth. Inside, chained to a ring-bolt in the wall, lay a figure, emaciated, clad in rags, skin mottled with bruises old and new. A man, mid-30s, wild-eyed, beard matted with grime. He flinched from the light, chains rattling in panic. "Easy now," Holmes murmured, sliding through the breach, hands open. "We're not him." The man blinked, tears carving tracks through filth. "Water, please." Lila darted up the steps, returning with a flask. He drank greedily, coughing spasms that racked his frame. "Name?" Holmes pressed gently. "Elias Blackwood. Victor's partner. In the trade. Betrayed me when the yard closed in. Bricked me here 3 years past. To rot with his ledgers. Said I'd sing to no one." Miriam knelt shakily beside him, her emerald eyes mirroring his despair. "Elias. My brother's friend from the old days. Victor swore you fled to America." Elias laughed bitterly, a hollow bark. "Fled? He starved me, dosed me to silence. The opium dreams, they whispered of you, walled away upstairs. I scratched the pipes, hoping you'd hear kin below. Reverend Thorne unchained him with steady hands, murmuring scripture soft as balm. The Lord loosens the prisoners." James hovered, face ashen, realizing the web ensnared his uncle too, family wreckage deeper than imagined. Watson examined the wounds, tisking, gangrene setting in the ankle. "We need a surgeon now." Gregson nodded grimly, no bluster left. "I'll summon the wagon." But Holmes... This ties Victor to the docks ring, half the yard's cold cases. Holmes paced the vault, mind a whirlwind piecing fragments. Victor's greed birthing the parlor's tomb, Miriam's descent into madness to silence guilt, the opium fueling it all. Yet amid the vileness, Grace's thread, Elias alive, a survivor mirroring Miriam's rebirth. As they hauled Elias up, his weight shared among them, Holmes lingered by the ledgers. Flipping pages by lantern glow, entries leaped, bribes to Gregson's predecessor, shipments masked as coal, and a final notation. Eleanor's dowry funneled to poppy fields abroad. The widow's complicity veiled in mourning silk. Miriam caught his gaze, unflinching. "I knew fragments, ignored the rest, for the manor, for James." Holmes closed the book. "Knowledge burdens, but confession liberates. You've begun that path." Back in the parlor, Elias propped on settee, broth reviving him, the circle reformed. Reverend Thorne led prayer, voices weaving, Watson's baritone steady, Lila's soprano tentative, James's boyish tenor cracking with relief. Even Gregson bowed head, murmuring assent. Holmes stood apart, arms crossed, but his grey eyes softened, the intellect yielding to something warmer, unnameable. Watson sidled close. "You've saved 2 souls tonight, old chap. The man of reason," touched by the divine. Holmes's lips twitched. Reason observes patterns. This defies them. Flawed vessels, mending. Yet as Elias clasped Miriam's hand, siblings reunited in ruin's wake, a shadow stirred beyond the window panes. Fog parted briefly, revealing a silhouette, tall, cloaked, watching. Not Gregson's man. Victor's remnant. A rival from the trade. The watcher melted into night, but Holmes's nape prickled. The web's strands lingered, opium's ghost uncoiling. Restoration beckoned, but one final coil tightened, threatening to drag them under anew. Elias stirred, whispering hoarsely. Victor had a lieutenant. Moriarty's shadow, they called him. Comes for loose ends. Holmes's gaze sharpened on the darkness. Then we tie them off, properly. Dawn crept over Kensington's spires, gas lamps flickering out, but Hargrove Manor's light burned steady. Miriam traced her locket, now emblem of truth unearthed. James vowed silently to rebuild, free of shadows. Lila smiled faintly, her own secrets perhaps easing. Yet Holmes knew, redemption's path wound treacherous. The cellar's heart beat on, pulsing warning. What lieutenants stalked the fog, and what vengeance brewed in Limehouse depths. As Watson bandaged Elias, Holmes slipped to the alcove, pocketing a ledger page. The game's board reset, Mercy's test evolving. No one beyond reach, but some reached back, claws extended. The rumble echoed faintly once more, or was it carriage wheels? Miriam tensed. Holmes, finish it. He nodded, resolve stealing. Into the fog, then. The final unveiling awaited. Holmes stepped into the swirling fog of Kensington's pre-dawn streets, the chill biting through his ulster like a reproach from the Thames itself. Watson followed close, revolver heavy in his coat pocket, his limp more pronounced on the slick cobblestones. Behind them the manor's lamps dimmed, casting long shadows that clawed at their heels. Eleanor Hargrove lingered in the doorway, her emerald eyes fierce with unspoken plea, while Lila Thorne clutched James's arm, the boy pale but resolute. Elias and Miriam huddled inside with Reverend Thorne, their fragile peace a candle against the gathering storm. The air hung thick with coal smoke and river rot, gas lamps blooming faintly like dying stars. Holmes moved with predatory grace, hawkish nose twitching at the scent of opium wafting from the east. Limehouse's siren call. Elias's warning echoed in his mind, Victor's lieutenant, Moriarty's shadow, tying off loose ends. The ledger page burned in Holmes's pocket, its cryptic entries pointing to a warehouse by the docks, where Hargrove's illicit trade in dream smoke had festered unchecked. Watson cleared his throat, voice low. Steady on, Holmes, this isn't Baker Street deduction. It's a viper's nest. Holmes's grey eyes gleamed in the gloom. Precisely why patterns emerge clearest in chaos, Watson. Victor built an empire on addiction's chains. His lieutenant guards the remnants. We end it tonight. They pressed on, hansom cabs rattling past like ghosts, the fog muffling hoofbeats into whispers. Holmes's mind raced, piecing the web. The bricked parlor, not madness but concealment of Victor's ledgers, stained with blood and resin. Eleanor's guilt, bricking it to bury shame, only for the walls to weep secrets. Opium residue seeping like tears. Elias and Miriam, Victor's bastard children from a Limehouse liaison, pawns in a game of inheritance and revenge. Lila, the maid with her own scars from the dens, had whispered the first clue. Even Gregson, ambitious bulldog, now circled warily behind, his rumpled suit, damp, red face set in grim determination. A low rumble vibrated through the stones, not thunder, but the pulse of the river trade. They veered toward Wapping Stairs, where derelict warehouses loomed like blackened teeth. Holmes halted at a rusted gate, chain glinting wetly. Inside, lantern light flickered through cracked panes, silhouettes shifting like opium phantoms. Gregson gripped his whistle. My men are posted. One blast, and— No, Holmes cut in sharply. Authority blinds here. We slip in. Observe. They scaled the wall, Watson grunting softly, his war wounds protesting. Dropping into the yard, the stench assaulted them, decaying fish, chemical tang, the sweet rot of poppy. Great stamped Hargrove imports teetered in stacks, lids pried open to reveal viscous cakes of black tar. Holmes knelt, fingers tracing a seam, mind alight with calculations, yield from turkey fields, routes via shadowed captains, profits funneled to Victor's vaults. Voices drifted from within, guttural cockney laced with foreign burr. The lieutenant, Malachi Slade, Holmes recalled from Scotland Yard whispers. Ex-soldier, twisted by the trade, Moriarty's whisperer in the shadows. They crept to a side door, splintered and ajar. Peering in, the scene unfolded. A cavernous room lit by swaying lanterns, air hazy with smoke. Men lounged on filthy pallets, pipes glowing cherry red, eyes vacant as they chased dragons. At the center, Slade paced, a wiry figure in his 40s, scarred cheek, twitching eyes like polished obsidian. He barked orders, subordinates scrambling to shift crates toward a waiting barge. Elias was right, Watson murmured. Loose ends. Miriam's name on that ledger, inheritance threat. Holmes nodded, pulse steady. And redemption's test. Slade spun suddenly, nostrils flaring like a hound's. Who's there? Show yourself or taste the blade. No choice now. Holmes straightened, stepping into the light, hands visible. Mr. Slade. Victor Hargrove sends regrets. Loose ends, you say? Slade's laugh rasped, dry as dockside gravel. Holmes, the spiders fly. Victor's ghost walks, eh? Come to claim his brats. Watson and Gregson flanked in, revolver and truncheon ready. The room tensed, pipes clattering to the floor as dreamers stirred, feral eyes focusing. Slade circled, knife glinting. Victor built this. Fed the hunger, lined pockets. I was his shadow, kept the yard blind, rivals sunk in the Thames. Eleanor knew, bricked her parlor to hide the ledgers. But you unravel it all. Holmes's voice cut cool, unyielding. Unravel. I illuminate. The parlor wept because walls remember. Opium stain, blood from your enforcers. Miriam and Elias, not threats but heirs denied. Slade lunged, blade arcing. Holmes sidestepped, precise as a fencer, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting. They grappled, crashing into crates, black tar bursting like ink. Watson fired a warning shot into the rafters, splintering wood, scattering men toward exits. Gregson charged, bulldog roar echoing, cuffing two runners. Slade broke free, panting, back to a pillar. You think law ends this? Moriarty laughs from afar. The hunger never dies. Victor's legacy. Holmes pinned him, knee to chest, grey eyes boring in. Legacy. Chains. I see patterns, Slade. Your scars, from the wars, like Watson's. But you chose the pipe over purpose. Slade's obsidian gaze flickered. A crack. Wars took my leg's strength, dreams took the rest. Victor promised power. And delivered damnation, Holmes pressed, voice softening fractionally. A rarity, this empathy uncoiling. Miriam escaped these dens. Lila too. Even you, flawed vessel, but not shattered. Watson watched, transfixed. The man of reason, offering grace. Slade sagged, knife dropping. The bricked room. Eleanor's sin or mine? I forced her hand once, ledger threats. Confession's weight hung heavy. Gregson snorted, snapping irons on, another for the yard. But Holmes lingered, mind whirling. Not end, beginning. Slade, testify. Unravel the web fully. Moriarty's shadow fades in light. Slade nodded wearily, chains rattling. For the boy. James? Victor's get to? Holmes released him to Gregson. Turning to Watson. Mercy tempers justice, old friend. Outside, fog lifting to reveal slate-grey dawn, they dragged Slade toward waiting peelers. Lila waited at the stairs, lantern high, Reverend Thorne beside her, Bible tucked underarm. Eleanor emerged from a carriage, face ashen but eyes alight. It's done, she whispered. The parlor's tears dry, Holmes replied. But one shadow lingers. Moriarty's architect, the barge manifests. Watson glanced at the river, where a sleek cutter sliced the mist, captain's silhouette unmistakable. Not escape, pursuit. Holmes's nape prickled anew. The final coil tightens. Back to the manor. Arm yourselves. Eleanor touched his sleeve, haunted eyes meeting piercing grey. You've given us more than truth, Mr. Holmes. Hope. He inclined his head, intellect yielding once more to the unnameable. Patterns defy Mrs. Hargrove, we all do. As they hurried back, the cutter's wake lapped ominously, Limehouse's depths exhaling one last breath. Inside Hargrove Manor, the circle waited, Elias clasping Miriam's hand, James wide-eyed, Lila's soprano humming a faint hymn. Reverend Thorne's voice rose in prayer, steady anchor. But Holmes paced the foyer, violin case in hand. No, revolver now. The board reset, but checkmate loomed. Moriarty's lieutenant was no lone wolf. The professor pulled strings from afar. A note slipped under the door. Loose ends, Holmes. All of them. Watson's hand steadied on his shoulder. Faith in patterns or in providence? Holmes stared into the rising sun, its light piercing stained glass. Both, perhaps. The unveiling crests. Yet as peace settled uneasily, a floorboard creaked upstairs. In the bricked parlor, long opened. Dust sifted down, carrying a whisper, not ended, but evolving. What final secret wept from the walls? Holmes froze in the foyer of Hargrove Manor, his revolver half drawn from the violin case that masked it so well. The creak from above lingered in the air like a held breath, dust motes dancing in the slanted morning light that pierced the stained glass transom. His mind raced through possibilities, settling beams, a rat in the wainscoting, or something far more deliberate. Patterns, he thought, always patterns, but this one felt laced with malice, a thread pulled taut from Moriarty's distant web. Watson was at his side in an instant, service revolver already in hand, his limp forgotten in the surge of old instincts from Afghan sands. Eleanor clutched the newel post, her black silk gown whispering against the polished oak, emerald eyes wide with the fragile hope now teetering on dread. Lila Thorne stood sentinel by the parlor door, her lithe frame tense. Lantern still flickering though dawn encroached, while Reverend Thorne murmured a steady prayer, his Bible open like a shield. Elias gripped Miriam's hand tighter, the boy's wide eyes. James, they called him now, Victor's hidden son, darting upward, innocent terror etching his young face. That note under the door burned in Holmes's pocket. Loose ends. He ascended the stairs first, boots silent on the carpeted treads, every sense attuned to the house's pulse. The bricked parlor loomed at the corridor's end, its wall breached days ago, revealing the horror within. Victor's final depravity sealed away, bones and secrets interred like a pharaoh's curse. But now as he pushed the door ajar, a chill draught carried the metallic tang of fresh blood, faint but unmistakable, mingling with the musty rot of exposed lath and plaster. Inside, chaos greeted him. The room, once a tomb of bricked silence, now bore fresh scars, floorboards pried loose near the hearth, a pry bar discarded like a serpent's shed skin. In the corner where Eleanor had confessed her desperate act, a small figure huddled, James trembling, his nightshirt smeared with dust and something darker. The boy looked up, tears carving paths through grime on his cheeks. "Mr. Holmes." It came back. The shadow man. He took the box. Said father would want it with him. Holmes knelt swiftly, his hawkish features softening for a fraction, grey eyes scanning the child's wounds, shallow cuts on his palms, defensive scratches. Shadow man. Moriarty's lieutenant, no doubt. The architect Slade had half-named in his testimony. The barge manifests Holmes had glimpsed earlier. Now this incursion confirmed it. A lacquered box. Victor's ledger of sins, forged deals, smuggled opium roots tying to Limehouse dens, Moriarty's invisible empire etched in code. Watson burst in behind, cursing under his breath. "Good God, Holmes, the lad's hurt. We must get him down." "No," Holmes murmured, voice a razor edge. "First, secure the room. Reverend Lila, bar the doors below. Eleanor, stay with them." She hesitated, haunted eyes pleading. "James is my charge now, through all this wreckage. Let me—" Eleanor's words cut short as a low groan echoed from the adjoining dressing room, hidden behind a false panel Victor had favored for his vices. Holmes signaled Watson, and they advanced, revolvers leveled into the gloom. The air thickened with the scent of chloroform and sweat, the panel ajar just enough to reveal a slumped form. Inspector Gregson, bound and gagged, his bulldog face bruised purple, rumpled suit torn. "Gregson," Watson rushed forward, slicing bonds with a pocket knife. The inspector spat the rag free, red face contorted in fury and pain. "Ambushed me outside the station. Bastard slipped in like smoke, tall scar on his jaw, eyes like coals. Took the evidence crate, said you'd know why. Moriarty sends regards, Holmes. Said you'd chase shadows while he ties the noose." Holmes's pulse quickened, not with fear but the electric clarity of pursuit. The scar, Slade's description matched. The lieutenant, bold now, escalating from whispers to strikes. Victor's box held the key, manifest linking Hargrove's factories to Moriarty's network, proof of rigged contracts, vanished workers fed to the Thames. Loose ends indeed, James as bait, Gregson as message. Downstairs voices rose in alarm. Holmes and Watson half-carried Gregson down, the inspector grumbling through split lips. Eleanor cradled James, rocking him gently, her poised facade cracking as maternal instinct surged. Lila pressed a cloth to the boy's cuts, her soprano voice weaving a soft hymn, words from Psalms carrying through the foyer like balm. Reverend Thorne closed his Bible, steady gaze on Holmes. "The evil that men do lives after them, Mr. Holmes, but so does the light that exposes it. We've bricked no more walls here. Truth weeps free." Holmes nodded curtly, intellect warring with an unfamiliar ache. Detached observer no longer. These souls, their fractures, mirrored his own isolation. Watson's loyalty, Eleanor's unraveling grace, the child's innocence. They demanded more than deduction. Mercy tempers justice, he'd told Watson hours ago. Now, has the cutter's distant horn wailed on the Thames, pursuit called? "We arm and wait," Holmes declared, pacing anew. "The shadow returns for the boy, or us. Moriarty's game ends here." Eleanor rose, James clinging to her skirts. "No more running. Victor's shadow poisoned us all, greed, control, secrets bricked away. I chose confession over ruin, now we choose together." Her words hung, raw and redemptive, stirring something in Holmes's chest. Patterns defied, human will, fragile yet unyielding. Watson reloaded, mustachioed face set with quiet resolve, his war-hardened faith anchoring the room. Hours stretched, tension coiling like fog off the river. Gas lamps flickered to life as dusk bled into the manor, casting long shadows across Persian rugs. Lila served tea laced with brandy, her lithe hands steady despite fear in her eyes. Elias James dozed fitfully in Miriam's lap, the name shift a small victory amid storm. Gregson nursed his wounds, grudging respect softening his bluster. Holmes stood vigil at the window, violin reclaimed, bow drawing haunting strains from gut strings, a lament for fallen kings, Moriarty's network of deceit. Inner turmoil gnawed. Pursuit of truth had led here to a family's brink, his methods ruthless as the foe's. Watson approached, hand on shoulder. "You've changed us all, old friend. Not just cases solved, souls mended." Holmes paused the bow, piercing eyes meeting kind blue. "And I?" "Justice clashes with law, Watson. Moriarty's web spares none." A splintering crash shattered the fragile peace, front doors buckling under assault. The shadow man erupted into the foyer, scar jagged in lantern light, revolver barking flame. Bullets splintered banister, Gregson diving for cover, shouting peelers inbound, but too late. Holmes fired once, grazing the intruder's arm, but the man lunged upward toward the parlor stairs. For the boy. Chaos reigned. Lila screamed as wood shards flew, Reverend Thorne shielding her with his body. Eleanor scooped James, fleeing to the kitchen, heart pounding with terror, born of buried pasts. Watson charged, limp be damned, tackling the scar-faced fiend mid-stairs. They tumbled, grunts and curses echoing, revolver skittering free. Holmes descended like judgment, pinning the lieutenant's throat with boot. "Yield. The manifest's the boy, loose ends tie to you." The man laughed through bloodied teeth, coal eyes gleaming fanaticism. "Moriarty cuts all threads, Holmes. The widow's parlor weeps your doom, poison vial, primed in the dust." Poison. Holmes's mind flashed to the sifted dust earlier, unseen grains. James had clawed the floorboards, inhaled. Eleanor's cry pierced from below. "He's seizing!" "James." Holmes hauled the intruder up, Watson cuffing him roughly. Gregson bellowed triumph as constables swarmed, but Holmes bolted to the kitchen. James convulsed on the flagstones, foam at lips, Eleanor's hands frantic over him. Reverend Thorne knelt, anointing oil from his vial, voice rising in urgent prayer. Lord, grace amid poison, effort and mercy entwined. Holmes's hands shook as he pried the boy's jaw, forcing charcoal slurry down, antidote from Gregson's kit. Patterns blurred, genius failed where faith bridged. James's spasms eased, breath ragged but steadying. The shadow man dragged away, spitting defiance. Professor watches. Checkmate nears. As night deepened, Holmes slumped against the wall, violin silent, revolver cold. Transformation etched deep. Truth not solitary but communal, grace-forged. Eleanor met his gaze, gratitude raw. "You've saved more than life, Mr. Holmes. Our souls." But Watson's face paled at the window. "Holmes, the cutter docks. Moriarty's barge unloads shadows. Not one man, an army." The manor's fragile sanctuary trembled anew, final coil snapping tight. Dawn's hope yielded to encroaching dark. What army wept from the Thames? Fog clung to the Thames like a shroud as Holmes, Watson, and Reverend Thorne slipped from Hargrove Manor under cover of pre-dawn gloom. Eleanor's parting whisper echoed in Holmes's mind. "Stay safe for all our sakes," her hand lingering on his sleeve, a bridge between intellect and the fragile warmth of human trust. James slept now, charcoal purging the venom from his small frame, Lila tending him with quiet hymns that filled the kitchen like incense. But the cutter docks called, a serpent's lair where Moriarty's web converged. Watson gripped his service revolver, limp forgotten in the adrenaline surge, his breath visible in the chill. That barge, Holmes, black as pitch, crew like ghosts. If it's an army, we're walking into slaughter. Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, pipe clenched, unlit between teeth. Armies break on patterns, Watson. Moriarty's genius mirrors mine. Solitary, precise. Shadows unload crates, yes, but for what? The parlor dust, the manifests, opium roots veiled as philanthropy. The widow's secret fuels it all. Reverend Thorne walked between them, his clerical collar stark against the murk, anointing oil still staining his fingers. Faith sees patterns too, Mr. Holmes. Grace disrupts the solitary genius. That boy's survival. Your mind, my prayer, not chance. The docks loomed, a labyrinth of rotting timbers and swaying lanterns, the river's lap a mocking lullaby. Cranes groaned under weight unseen, and from the barge's hold came muffled clanks, metal on metal, whispers in guttural tongues. Holmes crouched behind stacked barrels, senses sharpening, salt-rimed air thick with tar and fear sweat, the distant toll of Big Ben marking 5. There, Watson's nudge. Figures emerged, gaunt men in ragged greatcoats, faces scarred by the same coal-dark fanaticism as the lieutenant's. Crates pried open revealed not opium but vials, hundreds shimmering with the parlor's poisoned dust. Moriarty's endgame, flood London's veins, not with mere narcotics, but a paralytic plague, choking the empire's heart. One thug spat orders in clipped German, dispersed to the markets by dawn. The professor's gift to the Queen, her guards first. Holmes's pulse quickened, a rare thrill of moral fury piercing his detachment. Not intellectual sport, this, a war on souls. He signaled, but Thorne laid a hand on his arm. "Wait, see the broken ones among them. Redemption whispers even here." A scuffle erupted as Gregson's delayed constables charged from the fog, shouts, clubs cracking. Chaos bloomed, thugs scattering like rats, vials shattering in sprays of glittering death. Watson fired, dropping a leader, but Holmes vaulted forward, mind-mapping trajectories. 3 crates to the river, 2 to alley carts. He tackled a runner, gaunt frame slamming into splintered planking, the man's eyes wild with desperation. Moriarty promised rebirth. Holmes saw.